Jen spent his entire life being everyone's punching bag. Bullied at school, abused at home, and too afraid to fight back, he watched the people he cared about suffer while he could do nothing. But the day his tormentor brutally killed the only friend who had ever shown him kindness, something inside him finally snapped. One violent outburst was enough to send him to the most brutal juvenile prison in the country. In a place where violence is the only law, survival belongs to the strongest, and he, like vicious dog, will chew his way to the very top. A juvenile correctional facility. A group of guys gathered near the training ground. One of them turned to his friend with a smirk and asked, "Have you heard about this?" They said that the loser from the north building had climbed on the boss's right arm. He offered to bet on how many ribs he'd lose, and the guy said it was unlikely he'd get away with just broken ribs. Death was common here. Voices could be heard up ahead, everyone rooting for their favorite. The guy asked the inmates to move aside so he could see, and was very surprised when he saw the guy there. Jen was beating up a big guy he'd pinned to the floor, and the other inmates were trying to pull him away, but they were unsuccessful. Jen kept punching the man in the face, knocking out his teeth. The guy holding him pressed harder on his neck, which really bothered him, so he punched him, then bit the other inmate on the arm, and they both finally let him go. The guys immediately backed away, because they weren't the first people Jen could knock out in an attempt to stop him. That guy was shocked by what he saw. He had defeated the boss's right-hand man after all, and he dealt with him rather brutally. Is he even human? He's like a monster that broke out of hell. Those two pounced on Jen. He kicked one of them in the stomach and the other in the face. Everyone here calls him a mad dog. The warden pointed the spotlight at him. He stopped and caught his breath, thinking, a mad dog out of hell? They got it all wrong. The place he came from was much worse than any hell. His life was simply terrible until he met him. When Amamori Jen was still a schoolboy, he was bullied. Jumping out of the locker, he ran out into the hallway, quickly looked around for a new place to hide and went into the storage room, thinking that they wouldn't find him here. Quietly closing the door, he walked to the corner on shaky legs and sat down. He felt this hell firsthand the moment that guy laid eyes on him. Footsteps were heard outside, and the guy called his name, causing him to tremble with fear even more. Running his bloody fingers along the wall, the guy headed for the storage room and asked if he had hidden well. MC saw his shoes through the crack under the door, and when the footsteps faded, he hoped he had left. But suddenly his voice was heard right at the door. Jen immediately jumped up, quietly approached the shelf in search of an escape route, and at that moment the door opened, and the guy said with a smirk that he had found him. MC was very scared. The guy kicked him, pinned him against the wall, and urged him to close his eyes. It would not hurt so much. He shouldn't worry. He would make sure everything went well on the first try. Jen closed his eyes, clenched his teeth, and this guy, putting on brass knuckles, began to beat him. In this world, they say there are things far more terrible than hell itself, and those are people who take pleasure in the suffering of others. When he finished, he dragged Jen out of the storage room by the hair and called him a fat pig. That thing broke after just a couple of blows. They slipped him a defective item at that store. He'll burn it. People like him are very cruel, contemptuous of others. The weak can't survive among them. The country was swept by a wave of horrific crimes committed by teenagers, and society was outraged by the ineffectiveness of the juvenile law. The maximum sentence for teenagers is 20 years, and those under 14 are sometimes released on the spot. The government amended the law, making life imprisonment the maximum penalty, but in reality, they are only sent to juvenile correctional facilities. This measure, which is not actually a punishment, has only led to an increase in youth crime. For teenagers now, power is everything. Bullying cases continue to multiply. For those who bully others, it's nothing more than a game, but for the victims, it's a waking nightmare from which they can't wake up. No one can stand up to the strong, and if you don't find a way to survive, the only hope left is despair. It was an ordinary day. MC was walking home from school, and a guy from another school had already been cornered by local bullies. One of them patted him on the cheek and asked if he should call his older brother for help. His friend made a dramatic face and said that he heard his brother was now in prison for murder, that it was so creepy. The bully took money out of his wallet and asked that since he was the brother of a criminal, they had every right to shake some money out of him. Right? The guy rushed to defend his brother's honor, but as soon as he uttered a word, they immediately threw him to the ground and started kicking him, telling him to shut up, saying he could probably use a little parenting. Jen was walking down the road at the time, happy to have survived another day. He noticed an emaciated dog on the sidewalk next to a box, apparently the other guy's home. He reached out to it and noticed that it was covered in wounds. It looked like they were in the same boat. A plaintive cry for help from the other guy came from a nearby alley. MC got scared and immediately looked in, asking them to leave him alone. The bullies continued beating him, and he reached out to them, tearfully begging for help, and he thought, judging by the uniform, he was from the neighboring school. The bullies immediately turned their attention to him. They greeted him, and one of them said that his younger ones were just getting hungry. What will he say about this? Jen took out his wallet and said that this was all he had. The guy immediately checked what was in it and noticed that this bastard had more money. He returned his wallet, but on the condition that his breakfast be ready tomorrow morning too. and he thanked him and was about to leave. But his gaze fell on the guy crying on the ground. He hesitantly called out to the bullies and asked if they would let that guy go. Their faces immediately twisted. One of them said that the guy's brother was the killer. The younger brother is no less to blame. It's called collective responsibility. Let him not be impudent just because they showed respect and politely greeted him. Let him not even dare test his patience. He can repeat this to Kanemoto's face? Just the mention of that name filled the MC with wild fear. Kanemoto Hiromi is the boss who runs Hanam High School. He's a demon who made his life a living hell. He's from a rich family and bullies people just for fun, out of boredom. For some reason, he latched onto him right after he entered. And when that happens, you either go crazy or die. The bully told him to get out of here if he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of everyone tomorrow, and he immediately took a step back, saying that he didn't see anything. In his mind, he apologized to the guy. He really wanted to help him, but with his powers, he simply couldn't handle it. They continued beating him, and he left, blaming himself for it. He felt so sorry for him that he burst into tears. There was nothing he could do. He had no friends. He was all alone. He reached home. His apartment was in the basement. Right now, his father was drinking as usual, and his mother was sitting next to him. He asked her if today was payday, right? She brought the money? She said fearfully that they needed the money for living expenses this month and for the child. He loudly put the bottle on the table, ordering her to shut up. Jen opened the door a crack, looked inside, and saw how his father started beating his mother, telling her to go sell her body if she had no money. And he covered his ears and mentally asked his mother for forgiveness. It was all because he was so weak. His father continued to beat her, just so she would give him money, and exclaimed that they were animals. Whose money do they live on here? His phrase about animals echoed in the MC's head, the same thing Hiromi called him when he mocked him, forcing him on his knees to lick his shoes. The other guys started laughing at him, saying that they would like to see the parents of this idiot. If they gave birth to an animal, then they themselves must be some dogs. But all this time, his mother took care of him, raised him diligently, so it hurt him to hear their insults. He could tolerate mockery of himself, but not of his mother. He gathered his courage, ran into the apartment, and rushed to his father, telling him to stop. He immediately smashed a bottle on his head, calling him a brat, and blood poured from his forehead. He fell, clutching his head, and his mother called out to him worriedly, and his father exclaimed, "Does he want him to slap him?" MC didn't know what to do, his hand automatically reaching for the box cutter on the nightstand. He clutched it tightly with both hands, plucked up his courage, and told his father to stop right there. This made the man even angrier, and his mother crawled to him on her knees and began begging him to calm down, that she was okay. He told her that he would definitely protect her, and then his father spat in displeasure, unbuckled his belt, and told him not to make fun of him. On the street, he grovels before any punks, but at home he decides to play the hero, dragging his belt along the floor. He walked toward his son, and his wife stood in front of him, asking him to calm down. The man, furious, told Jen to try stabbing him if he had the courage. He was nothing but a worthless wretch. He would teach him a lesson. He swung the belt at him, and Jen was terrified and realized that if not now, then never again. And with his eyes closed, he leaned forward and did it. It was that rainy night when he stabbed his mother. He didn't even expect her to rush to the defense of this tyrant. Why did she do it? Jen, shocked, dropped the knife and fell, looking at her in shock, searching for an answer to this question. And his father pushed his mother away and exclaimed that this brat really wanted to stab him. MC, fearful, said that it was not so. He only wanted to protect his mother. His father, furious, called him a brat and told him to do it again. He approached him. He backed away in fear, and then his mother grabbed the man by the leg and asked him not to do it. Jen did it by accident. She begged him to forgive him. He told her to let go of him, then grabbed her by the hair and started hitting her on the head, telling her not to interfere. The woman held his leg tightly, not letting him get closer to her son. MC couldn't watch this and called out to him, asking him not to do this. His father let her go, furiously swearing to beat the crap out of him today. And his mother whispered to him, "Run." MC swallowed nervously. He couldn't watch her suffer and promised to protect her, but she told him not to worry about her. The man took a step. She desperately asked her son to run away from there. Then he got up and rushed to the door, asking her for forgiveness. He chickened out and left his mother there, and his father hit her again, saying it was all her fault. Lying on the floor in tears, she just begged her son to run away from there as far away as possible. And so he found himself in the rain in the middle of a lonely street. He just ran away, failing to protect his mother. He felt sorry for being so useless. Two schoolgirls were walking behind him on the road. They saw that he didn't have an umbrella at all, which is why he was completely wet, and they felt sorry for him. They talked to each other, and MC pursed his lips, mentally asking them not to look at him. But suddenly one of them handed him an umbrella and told him to take it with a smile. He'll catch a cold if he doesn't hurry home. He took it in confusion, after which she ran under the umbrella to her friend, and she asked, "What if he's a bad person?" She answered her that her brother said that you need to help those in trouble, so if she ever got into trouble, someone would definitely help her. Her friend remarked that she hadn't seen her brother for ages, but she still followed his instructions. Jen watched them go and remembered her words. Should he go home? But where? He felt something nudge his leg. looked down, and it was the same dog he had seen earlier. The dog barked as if greeting him, and he patted it on the head, saying that he didn't have any food with him. He would gladly take it with him, but he himself had nowhere to go back to. The dog ran to the side and turned to him, calling him, and he asked, "Does it want him to follow it?" The dog turned to the side, and MC ran after it. The dog led him across an intersection and brought him to a dry place. Jen looked at it in surprise and asked, "So is this where it wanted to lead him?" Since he had nowhere else to go, he sat down by the wall and picked up the dog, deciding to spend the night there. But morning came. He woke up from a piercing bark. That dog was now protecting him from the pit bull. And suddenly the MC heard a voice that immediately drove away all his drowsiness. Hiromi, surrounded by his girls, stood right in front of him, waiting for him to wake up. He smirked, telling them to look at him. It was his dear friend Jen. He was very scared and asked what he was doing there, and one of the girls said that he lived nearby. There was nothing strange about that. She turned to Hiromi and asked if he was really friends with that idiot. He confirmed it. Without him, he would be bored to death. The dog stood in front of Jen, protecting him, but Hiromi paid no attention and asked Jen why he was silent. He patted him on the cheek and told him to show his teeth, like that dog, and let him try barking. MC gritted his teeth. He didn't want to humiliate himself like that, but Hiromi was losing his patience. He exclaimed that he was tired of messing with him, that he was irritating him. Jen mumbled, and the guy couldn't take it anymore and grabbed him by the hair, lifting his head, and ordered him to start barking immediately. The dog immediately bit his hand. He pulled away from Jen and cursed loudly, and he thought in surprise, did that dog protect him? Hiromi was furious. He ordered his dog to attack, and the menacing pit bull barked loudly, and then pounced on the poor stray dog and sank his teeth into its neck. MC became very worried. The dog yelped, and while Hiromi watched the poor dog's slaughter with a smile, Jen fell to his knees before him and began begging him to stop. But Hiromi was about to teach him a lesson. He crouched down next to him and threw his arm over his shoulder, telling him to look at them carefully. The weak are incapable of protecting. MC continued to beg him to stop. The dog would die at this rate. The guy only laughed, grabbing his head, preventing him from turning away, and telling him to watch closely as it died and remember well what would happen if he dared to disobey him again. Jen burst into tears. It hurt him to watch what the pit bull was doing, and then a piercing yelp was heard, and the dog's whining abruptly died. MC screamed, asking him to stop, but it was too late. The pit bull had finished its work. Jen closed his eyes, unable to look at it, and Hiromi said it was simply disgusting. He threw it near the dead dog and ordered it to eat it. Then, all right, he would forgive him. Let him do it before he counted to 5. If he resisted, he knew what would happen. He started counting, and MC looked at this poor stray dog. He thought that no one except his mother would ever protect him. He thought he had finally gotten rid of his loneliness. Why did he always take everything away from him? When this dog protected him, he felt a drop of courage in himself. He thought that maybe he could protect someone too, but in the end, he couldn't do anything and was left alone again. Wasn't he allowed to feel at least a drop of warmth in this life? Was he doomed to have everything taken away from him forever? Jen stood up. Hiromi was surprised and asked what he was planning. Had he decided to go against him too? He put his hand on his shoulder and told him to try. But if he lays a finger on him, he'll go to juvenile hall for attempted murder. His brother said it was a great place, although they'll probably kill him on the first day there. Even if he gets out of prison, he'll never let him get away with it. He'll haunt him until he dies, and let him keep in mind, taking his own life won't solve anything. His mother will soon be selling her body, right? When that happens, one of his friends will take care of her. Maybe he'll get a brother or sister who will visit his grave someday. What should they start calling him? Maybe dog? A female dog produces puppies, right? Does she really bark in bed with her man? Playing with such a female must be a lot of fun. His words echoed in Jen's head. He couldn't take it anymore and asked, he knows that when he hears his name, he trembles with fear, right? But now he was shaking with rage. He slapped him in the face with all his might, grabbed him by the clothes, and pulled him towards him, shouting, doesn't he know that there are things that can't be said out loud? Hiromi, furious, grabbed him by the hair, asking how dare he hit him, and punched him in the face. But then the MC suddenly approached him, sank his teeth into his nose with all his might, and tore it off. Hiromi screamed very loudly. The girls were horrified by such a sight and panicked, and the guy fell to the floor and began rolling on it, trying to survive the pain. Jen, meanwhile, caught his breath. He looked very scary with blood on his lips. As Hiromi had promised him, he was taken into custody, and soon the court hearing began. The judge said, the defendant, Amamori Jen, 15, attacked his classmate, Kanemoto Hiromi, on the night of the 15th of last month. He was then arrested and told them about all the bullying, but the police didn't believe him at all. Hiromi's mother bribed the teachers and his classmates, so they refused to testify on his behalf. She also bribed his father, and he locked his mother up so she couldn't come to his aid. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in a juvenile correctional facility for assault. That day, he left one hell for another, a much more merciless one, where only the strongest survive, an endless hell. He was transported to the colony, shackled, and led with other prisoners for inspection. The warden hit him on the back, annoyed, telling him to stop walking so slowly, and he thought it was he who was being bullied. But he was the one who was sent to juvenile detention, and Hiromi, the real monster, received no punishment. They were all taken to the inspection room, ordered to undress and stand in line. Unlike the other prisoners, Jen looked quite innocent. The guard called him over and asked his name. He quietly told him, and he yelled at him, telling him to answer more clearly. MC flinched in fear. Then the man looked up at him and asked with a smirk, "So he was the one who bit off that guy's nose?" He gave him his number and told him to remember it. It was his name now. They were all bathed, or rather simply rinsed with a hose, and then led to another room, where a man in gloves and a doctor's coat was waiting for them. When it was Jen's turn, he told him to raise his hands and turn around, and when he did, the man put the list on the table, adjusted his gloves, and told him to take off his underwear. MC became very nervous. He realized what was about to happen, but there was nowhere to go. He took off his underwear, and the man checked his colon. Jen burst into tears, his dignity lost. Through humiliation and fear, he was completely destroyed. After that, they were all gathered in the main hall, and the warden ordered everyone to stand up. The director had arrived. The director looked at them all, then waved with a smile and told them to sit down. This is not a prison, so everything is not so strict here. If anything happens, they can rely on him. By the way, boys and girls are kept separately here, so they will not see girls. MC was even surprised. This place is much more decent than he thought. The director said that they will assign them to rooms. They will receive a proper upbringing so that they can become those that society needs. After that, the wardens began assigning them to rooms, and it was Jen's turn. Seeing him, a guy named Nagao, who was partial to boys, smirked and noted that there was another new guy here. They would have much more fun with him. His buddy told him not to be so happy, and he grumpily noted that he was the same way. MC passed another cell. One of the inmates pressed himself against the bars and exclaimed that a new punching bag had arrived. His buddy told him to stop talking nonsense, like he was a snotty kid. Jen was led further. The warden smirked and said that they had prepared a special cell for him. He led him there, smiled at the fear on his face, and then shoved him inside and told him to enjoy his new life in the colony. Inside the prison cell, there were a bunch of guys. Their boss, number 6720, called out to him and asked what his name was. They crowded around him. He muttered his name to them, and the guy immediately punched him in the face, calling him an idiot. He was actually asking for his number. Gritting his teeth, MC told him his number, 8725. And this bully said that first he had to go through an initiation rite. All the guys surrounded him. They threw him to the floor and started beating him, after which he told him to remember well. He was his dog now, and his orders were not to be questioned. Jen gritted his teeth, telling himself to endure. For now, he just needed to endure. Number 7411 noticed this and asked with a smirk, "Is he baring his teeth? Is he looking for trouble?" He grabbed him by the hair, lifting his head, and said that now he had to learn the rules here. There is a hierarchy in the colony. First comes the director, then the block chief, the boss, the general, the cell leader, the prisoner, and the slave. He is a slave here, so he should speak politely to everyone who is above him in status. He will have to give all bonuses to the cell leader. He will distribute them personally, and let him never dare to contradict those above him. Otherwise, he will be in trouble. He let him go, and the cell leader said that was all, but he needed to go to the toilet, so he would be his stand-in. MC didn't understand what he meant, and 6720 said that they all needed to pee, but the toilets were limited in the number of flushes, so they used the sink, but he couldn't reach it, so he needed to stand on something. Jen got down on all fours in front of the sink. The cell leader climbed on him and said that this was an honorable duty, available only to slaves. He began his business, splashing in all directions, and urine hit MC's face. He wasn't going to tolerate this. He suddenly ducked, causing 6720 to fall and hit his head on the edge of the sink, and then exclaimed in rage, "What the hell is he doing? He'll kill him." After that, all the prisoners started beating him with sticks, and he thought that things were bad. This was just madness. This level of madness doesn't even come close to comparing to Hiromi's antics. He apologized to his mother. It seems he won't get out of here. Suddenly, one of the prisoners numbered 6690, Miyatani Masaki, stood in front of Jen and asked the cell leader to stop. One of the prisoners asked what he was doing. Was he trying to protect this brat? He promised them to make sure he learned everything here properly. Maybe they should stop there? 6720 ordered him to mind his own business, and he, taking a handkerchief from his inside pocket, wiped the blood from Jen's face and asked him to moderate his ardor. If he was sent here, it means the management had a reason. Wanting to teach him a lesson is one thing, but if he suddenly dies, he will have a lot of problems. 6020 didn't object. He was right about that. Prisoner 4166 got angry because of this, but he had to step away and exclaimed that he was too talkative for such a weakling. 6720 told Masaki that he was leaving the newcomer in his care, but if anything happened, he would also be responsible for him. The guy just smiled at him in response, after which everyone went to their beds, and he handed Jen some ointment and told him to smear it on the wounds. He looked at him in surprise, wondering why he had helped him at all, and he told him to remember one thing. No matter what happened, he should just keep quiet and endure it. Otherwise, he would die. MC said that he wouldn't be able to endure it, and Masaki promised to help him. The only thing that matters is whether he wants to live. In the colony, everything follows a strict schedule. At 6:30 in the morning, there is wake up and preparation. Then comes the inspection and the exercises begin. At 7:30 a.m. they go to breakfast, and then there's personal time, which lasts 30 minutes. After that, there's studying, lunch, a break, more studying and group work, dinner, more group work, personal time, and getting ready for bed. Lights out. At 10 a.m., Jen asked what group work meant, and he told him that they split into groups and clean the living quarters. For example, he and Nagasawa clean the laundry room, and Fujino cleans the hallway. The doors to the prison cells swung open. Personal time began, and everyone was let out. The prisoners immediately ran out of their cells, and the guys, slowly emerging from theirs, began to discuss them. One of them asked, "Do you think they're up to their old tricks again?" His friend answered hesitantly, "I guess so. I hope they finish their personal time." Their friend asked, "If they came later, wouldn't they still have time?" Masaki also left the cell and told Jen to follow him and keep a close eye on everything here. The entire colony consists of the east, south, west, and north blocks, an annex for the administrative building, and a hospital. In the center is the courtyard, the work area, the bathhouse, and the laundry, and next to the north block is the isolation cell. This is the real colony. They went out into the courtyard, where all the prisoners had gathered to watch another fight with Kojo. His opponent exclaimed that he would definitely crush him today and flexed his fists with a grin, to which Kojo only replied, "If he wants to fight, he should shut his mouth." He quickly turned around and punched him in the face with all his might, sending him flying, and the other prisoners began to cheer for Kojo's opponents. MC was shocked and excitedly told Masaki that they were fighting. Why wasn't anyone stopping them? The guards were just standing there smoking. Masaki replied that from the outside, the correctional colony was no different from a prison, but this is how things really work. As he already knows, the territory is divided into 4 sectors, and except for the prison cells and the cafeteria, all areas are communal. On Sundays, correctional work is supposed to take place in the assembly hall, but the teacher was sick, so it was cancelled. Everything here is run by fistfights. Jen looked at him fearfully, asking what he meant, and he said, "It means that physical strength determines everything here. The stronger you are, the higher your status. You can even rule an entire sector, instead of the guards. Everyone else is subordinate to such a person, and the guards are happy to sit back until someone dies. They let them get away with everything. That's how it is." That guy fell under Kojo's blows. The prisoners started shouting at them that there is a lot of money at stake, so let them fight with all their might. Let them just try to lose. There are 4 of them, and they still haven't defeated him. The prisoners attacked Kojo. He pushed one of them away from him, and the other grabbed his torso and smirked, thinking that he managed to get him in a hold. But he quickly freed himself and hit him on the head with all his strength, after which he ducked, not allowing the other guy to grab him, grabbed his arm and twisted it, and then kicked him, throwing him to the edge of the platform. The only guy left standing looked at his comrades in fear and thought, "Is this guy a monster or something?" He clenched his fists and with a furious cry rushed into the attack, and then Kojo struck him from above, causing him to fall immediately. The spotlights shone on him, declaring his victory. He took his shirt and left to loud and joyful exclamations. Jen looked at him with admiration, thinking that he was almost not human at all, and Kojo seemed to be interested in him. Night fell. Everyone had long since gone to bed, but MC couldn't sleep. He kept remembering Kojo. It was incredible. If he had even 1/100th of his strength, everything would be different. But reality is too harsh. He finally fell asleep and the next day arrived. All the prisoners gathered for breakfast in the dining hall. MC sat at the table with Masaki and asked why, after such a brutal fight, no one was punished. He told him that it was an unspoken rule that any conflicts here were resolved by force. If you defeat someone of higher status, you take their place. The guards won't do anything. He asked in surprise, "So anyone can challenge you?" Masaki smirked and told him that there was no point if he didn't have the strength, because they didn't care who their opponent was. This horrified Jen, and Masaki said he understood. For people like them, who couldn't fight, the only way was to sit quietly and not resist. They could also try to find a patron. Suddenly, all the prisoners became agitated and jumped up from their seats. One of them told everyone to get up quickly. The boss was here. Masaki also jumped up and told Jen to get up. It was the boss of the North Block. He must not be angered under any circumstances. He stood up, and the boss headed to their table. Number 6720, with an ingratiating smile, asked what brought him here. But the man ignored him and walked past to the MC. He looked him up and down and asked, "Is that Amamori Gen?" He confirmed it fearfully, after which the man grabbed him by the clothes and pulled him sharply towards him, saying that his name was Kanemoto Retsu. He was the older brother of the guy whose nose he bit off. It was on his orders that he was transferred to the North Block. From now on, he would take very good care of him. After that, he addressed all the prisoners in the dining hall and told them to listen to him carefully. This guy was his now. If anyone dared to kill him, they would pay for it with their own lives. After that, he threw Jen on the floor and left, and one of his subordinates, the same Nagao who preferred to spend time with the boys, licked his lips at the sight of Jen. As soon as they left, Masaki ran up to him worriedly and asked, "Is he okay? Does he need to go to the infirmary?" And the other prisoners began to discuss it and were sure that most likely he would end up the same as the guy the boss had his eye on earlier. It was time for community service, and the MC's workstation turned out to be the shower. It was clean and there wasn't a soul around, so maybe he'd be safe here. How wrong he was. The big guy kicked the door down and approached him, asking, "He's the new guy, right?" He looked pretty hot. Jen backed away in fear, asking what he wanted, and he pinned him against the wall and told him not to be so afraid. He just wanted to have some fun with him. He pushed his hand away, asking him to stop, and accidentally hit the faucet and turned on the water. This only turned the guy on even more and said that this kind of environment puts him in the right mood. It's just pure pleasure. He pressed himself against him, started licking his face, telling him not to get so tense, and then put his hand down his pants and suggested that he'd just enjoy himself. MC was very scared. He tried to break free, but he grabbed him by the head and said with a smirk that he was more persistent than he thought. He slammed his head against the wall, and suddenly Masaki grabbed his hand and asked him to stop. The big guy turned to him with displeasure and asked, "Is he trying to interfere again?" He asked in response, "Did he not hear the boss's words? If he laid a finger on him, they would have big problems." The big guy couldn't contradict the boss, so he let Jen go, and then said with a smirk that he just wanted to joke about him. He could always take his place. He didn't mind. He approached him and breathed in his ear, saying that for now he was under protection, but sooner or later he would get into big trouble. After that, he left. Masaki approached Jen and asked if he was okay. He said fearfully that this guy was too dangerous. Would he really leave him alone? Masaki told him that Kanemoto Retsu was a scary person, but he became his shield. Even Nagao wouldn't dare touch him without permission, but since he had just refused him, there would be consequences. After work, MC headed back to his cell, and he was very upset because now cleaning in the shower would turn into torture. Suddenly, prisoners surrounded him. He got scared and asked what they were doing, and then one of them punched him in the face and they knocked him to the floor and started kicking him, saying that this was his punishment for refusing their boss. They were even ready to kill him, but Dr. Kanda appeared in time and sternly asked what they were doing there. They immediately stopped beating him and asked with smiles if they had scared her. They were just teaching him a little lesson. She smiled and asked them not to overdo it. They didn't need any extra trouble, and it was time for them to go. They said goodbye to her with a smile, casting a disdainful glance at Jen and leaving, telling him he was lucky. Afterwards, Dr. Kanda took Jen to the medical center and administered first aid. She immediately warned him that it would sting a little, then dabbed his wounds with gauze and told him not to force himself, and that if anything happened, he should tell her right away. Gritting his teeth, he told her he was fine, and she looked at him in surprise, noting that he was a strong guy. Night fell. MC was sitting on the bed and waiting for his friend. Masaki had volunteered to clean the bathhouse in his place, but he still hadn't returned. Had that idiot really done something to him? The thought of this scared him terribly. He jumped out of bed and started punching the bars, calling for the officer. Because of this, the cell leader immediately woke up and clucked his tongue in irritation. But MC continued calling for the officer, and then 6720 kicked him in the back, ordering him to shut up. Does he even know what time it is? Jen turned to him and fell to his knees in front of him, saying that Masaki had gone to clean the bathhouse and disappeared, so he needed to call the officer. He waved him off, exclaiming that they would start looking for him without him, that he should just shut up and wait, and he had just fallen asleep. After that, he returned to bed, and MC became worried. He was very worried about his friend. When morning came, everyone crowded at the entrance to the shower room. Jen immediately realized that something had happened and pushed his way through the crowd. What he saw shocked him. The guards were carrying Masaki away on a stretcher. He was covered in blood, beaten, and his clothes were torn. One of the prisoners pointed to the shower, telling the others to take a look. He'd apparently been beaten up pretty good. MC was horrified when he peered into the shower. There was blood everywhere, and his pants were lying around. Nagao saw him and asked with a smirk, "Is he even still alive?" Jen clenched his fists in rage. He turned to him and exclaimed, "Is this his doing?" Nagao smirked at his reaction and remarked that he was pretty good. He wanted to play with him specifically. His friends laughed and asked, "Does he really want to do this first thing in the morning?" He could tell them how it felt later. Nagao grabbed Jen's arm and said he wouldn't leave that easily, but MC wasn't going to take it and bit his arm, causing the big guy to cry out in pain and get angry. He started hitting him, but Jen still didn't unclench his jaws, only biting deeper into his skin. With his other hand, he tried to pry his mouth open, telling him to finally let go, and suddenly someone grabbed his shoulder and he turned around in anger, exclaiming that he was brave for deciding to stand in his way. It was Kojo. He pushed his hand away from Jen and he looked at him in surprise. Kojo told Nagao to get out of here. He wanted to wash himself, and he nervously clenched his teeth, thinking, what is he doing here? Clicking his tongue in displeasure, he led Jen after him, deciding to change places, and Kojo said that this was just a dump. Nagao realized that he wouldn't leave so easily, clenched his teeth in irritation and then kicked Jen and exclaimed, "This is his job, isn't it?" But they weren't finished yet. He left, and MC got up, after which he got to work. While Kojo was washing himself, Jen kept glancing at him nervously. Even Nagao chickened out in front of him. Who the hell was he? If he were as strong as him, he could protect those dear to him. Kojo noticed him staring at him, and told him to get lost already if he was done, and then MC remembered his friend. He immediately dropped his work and ran to the cell, where Masaki was lying on his bed. He silently apologized to him. This was all his fault. If this continued, he would only cause him more trouble. But how could he become stronger? He sat down next to him and took his hand. Then Masaki opened his eyes and said with a smile that his wounds had been treated, so he would be fine. He was sorry, but he would only have to take his bed for a while. Jen burst into tears and said it was all his fault, and he told him not to be so sad. The main thing was that he was safe. MC asked why he even went so far for him, and he, staring at the ceiling for a second, took a photo out of his inside pocket and said with a smile that he reminded him of his younger brother. He let him look at it and said that he was an excellent student, but very timid, so he was constantly bullied. But one day, he couldn't take it anymore and killed one of his bullies, so he took the blame and ended up here. Now he wonders how he's doing now. He hopes he's living a normal life. Jen stared at the photo in shock. It was the same guy who was bullied at the school gates. He can't believe he's Masaki's brother. Noticing his surprised look, he excitedly asked if he knew him. He confirmed it, and he asked with a smile, "How is he? He's okay, right?" He smiled nervously and lied to him that he was having fun with his friends. Hearing this, Masaki breathed a sigh of relief, which meant he did everything right. After his sadness, MC was overcome with rage. He decided to go report everything to the guards so that Nagao would answer for this, but Masaki stopped him, telling him not to even think about it. He loudly asked the reason in a rage, and he, putting his finger to his lips, told him to be quiet, after which he whispered in his ear, "This colony has one secret. A truly terrible secret." He was about to tell him what they really do in this place, but suddenly one of the prisoners loudly entered the cell and called out to Masaki, mockingly saying that he seemed to have had a good time. Did they have a good time there? Because of this, MC got angry and was about to answer him, but Masaki stopped him and shook his head, indicating that it was better for him not to interfere. After that, he told the guy that he better watch his mouth. Nagao probably wouldn't be happy if he heard that. Could he repeat everything word for word in front of him? He would have loved to see his reaction. The guy immediately fell silent. He awkwardly said goodbye to him and went to his bunk. Jen turned to Masaki in surprise and asked how he could remain so calm. He wasn't seriously going to keep quiet about what he did, was he? He answered him that here you need to hide your true face and use every opportunity to your advantage. He asked, "So this has something to do with the secret he mentioned?" Masaki immediately raised his hand, gesturing for him to shut up, and suggested that he go to the infirmary together tomorrow. MC agreed and helped him cover himself with a blanket, but the two of them had no idea that someone had overheard their conversation. Night fell. Jen still couldn't sleep. Masaki on the bottom bunk was constantly coughing. He looked at him worriedly to check if he was okay. Masaki always said that they should meekly endure, but that didn't save him from consequences like this. Was that really the best way to protect himself? If only he could become as strong as Kojo. Even Nagao was afraid of him. He was probably the strongest here. How could he even withstand 4 of them at once? Remembering Kojo's punch, he began punching the air, trying to recreate it, but he couldn't. How was he supposed to survive here? The next evening, they went to the infirmary with Kanda. Masaki apologized to him for calling him at such a late hour, and he told him everything was fine. He saw shadows moving around the corner, and wondered if they were supposed to be asleep by now. The director came out from around the corner, accompanied by officers. Seeing the newcomer and Dr. Kanda, he was slightly surprised, and asked what they were doing here. Kanda told him with a smile that Masaki had gotten worse, so they were taking him to the infirmary, and the director asked if something had happened. Masaki told him that it was nothing serious, that his old wounds had just reopened. MC was surprised that he hadn't told him anything, and the director moved on, telling him to take care of himself. When they had moved away from them, Jen asked him why he hadn't told him anything about Nagao, and he told him that you can't trust anyone here. He moved closer to his ear and whispered, "Besides, they produce illegal substances here and sell them on the outside." MC was very surprised and exclaimed that this was a crime. And who was behind this? Masaki shook his head and told him that they didn't know yet. Once they figure out who was behind all this, they will exchange this secret for what they need. But he mustn't tell anyone about this. Again, their conversation was overheard. Time passed, the doctor was treating the wounds, but suddenly officers entered the medical center and told Masaki that by order of the director, he would be transferred to the city hospital. A car was already waiting outside. Masaki was terrified and said that he didn't want to, and Jen was perplexed. Why didn't he want to leave? The conditions in a regular hospital should be better. Kanda excitedly grabbed the officer's hand, declaring that she would take full responsibility for his treatment, but he replied that it was for the patient's good. If she wanted to continue working here, it was better for her not to interfere. She let go of his hand and fell silent, and Masaki, with a bitter grin, clenched his fist and said that since they insisted, he would go. MC patted him on the shoulder with a smile and told him to make sure he was treated properly and that he would be waiting for his return. Masaki smiled bitterly. Jen had no idea what they would do to him, but he did. Finally, he told him not to forget what he had told him. Let him remain silent and patient. The only one who can protect him is himself. You can't trust anyone. After that, the officers took him away, and MC headed back to his cell in an elated mood, thinking that his friend would definitely recover. As soon as a real doctor examined his wounds, they would immediately report it to the director. Maybe this idiot will finally get what he deserves. The next morning, Jen came to the cafeteria. He got some food and headed to an empty table with a smile, wondering when Masaki would return. Although, maybe a couple of days of rest in the fresh air would do him good. He passed by a table where they were discussing how someone tried to escape the previous night and was killed, and the prisoners were surprised and asked, what on earth was this idiot thinking? And who is this idiot? Their friend with a smirk answered them that it was the guy from the West Block, Miyatani Masaki. Upon hearing his name, MC dropped the tray, trembling all over and asking in a rage, is Masaki dead? But he should be in the hospital. There must be some mistake. Senior Warden Katsumata Shiro entered the dining room, and everyone immediately fell silent because he was even worse than Nagao. Standing in the center of the dining room, Shiro announced, late last night, Miyatani Masaki injured 2 guards and tried to escape. During his escape, he was hit by a truck and died on the spot. Jen was in shock. This simply couldn't be true. Masaki wasn't strong enough to injure a prison guard. Such a thing simply couldn't happen. He headed for the exit and told them to remember this incident well. If they didn't want to end up like him, he advised them to keep a low profile. He glanced at them one last time and left. MC remembered Masaki being led away, how he waved goodbye to him, and he felt sad. And Nagao, next to him, suddenly said he was just starting to play with him. What a shame. Jen immediately became furious. He attacked him, shouting that he was an idiot, and he said with a smirk that at first he resisted, but when he asked if he wanted him to do it in front of everyone, he immediately became a good boy. Too bad. And he was looking forward to playing with both of them. MC was shaking with rage. He ordered him to shut up and pounced on him with his fists, exclaiming that he would never forgive him. Nagao easily dodged his punch, then kneed him in the face and threw him away, after which he pinned him to the floor and asked, did he decide to play the hero with such pathetic powers? Let him show him what he's made of. He pressed his foot on his chest. Jen started kicking him in the shin, which angered him, and then he hit him, calling him an idiot. He can't believe he actually picked a fight with him. What's the matter? Let him attack. He hit him again, then lifted him by his clothes and asked, was he already playing dead? He swung and accidentally hit Kojo's tray, after which he grabbed his hand and said that he spilled his soup. How does he plan to make it up to him? Nagao got nervous and thought, this idiot again? After thinking for a while, he let go of Jen, and one of the prisoners whispered to his friend if they should intervene and help him. He told him not to get involved. He wouldn't win anyway. And besides, Katsumata could be somewhere nearby. Another guy with a nervous smile approached Kojo and said that he would give him his soup if he just let it go. One of Nagao's friends worriedly said that he shouldn't start a fight with him, let him just calm down. He heard what they said. If he did this, he would expose Katsumata. Nagao irritably pulled his hand out of his grip and walked away, thinking that if he ran away now, he would look like a coward. Kojo passed by Jen and said that since he was alive, he should go to the infirmary. Masaki would want him to live. Gritting his teeth, MC gathered his strength and stood up, then followed Kojo. He approached Nagao and ordered him to get out of the way, thus clearing the way for Jen, and they continued on. Nagao was absolutely furious. He ordered him to stop immediately, and his friend hastened to calm him down, and Kojo turned to him and told him not to embarrass himself even more. Nagao, although nervous, was so angry that he exclaimed, does he think he can't beat him? The other prisoners began to whisper, this is bad. Was he seriously going to do this? MC thought that no matter how strong Kojo was, there were still more of them. Could he really win? Kojo told the big guy to go away or his food would get cold. And then Nagao lost his temper and attacked him in a rage, shouting that he would make him regret this. He easily dodged his punch, and the other prisoners immediately stood up to watch the fight and began placing bets. But some were afraid to bet on Kojo, as the boss would kill them later. The big guy pounced on Kojo with his fists, and he deftly dodged every blow, even with a tray in his hand, managing not to spill anything. One of the prisoners remarked that the boss had become even stronger. He had been training non-stop since he started losing. Nagao pounced on Kojo again, telling him to stop dodging and fight like a man, and he punched the locker behind Kojo. The guys began cheering for their boss, saying that he was simply incredible. If he really got going, he'd knock him out with one punch. Jen started to worry and wondered if he was really that good. Kojo continued to dodge him, and before he knew it, he'd collided with the table. Nagao saw this as an opportunity. He pounced on him, grinning as he thought that if he could beat him, he'd become #1 in this place. But he missed again, and Kojo took advantage of this and elbowed him in the back, causing him to fall face first onto the floor and bite his tongue. One of his subordinates ran up to him, worried. Kojo stepped aside, noticing with annoyance that the soup had spilled a little, but it wasn't that bad. Meanwhile, the guy helped Nagao up. He glared at Kojo, and MC thought, he knew it, force reigns in this place. The warden came over to the noise and exclaimed, what's going on here? If they're not going to eat, then they should get out of here. He looked at the wounded Nagao and asked, does he need a doctor? He only cursed in response, after which the warden looked at Jen with displeasure and ordered all the wounded to go to the infirmary. This is the cafeteria. Let them cause any more trouble. Nagao walked past Kojo's table and threatened him, telling Jen that the same applies to him and that he wouldn't be so lucky next time. The boss would be released in about a year, so he would definitely come and finish him off. so he should wait impatiently. After eating, MC went to the infirmary. Kanda treated his wounds and asked, "Is he here again?" Jen didn't answer her. Now he was absorbed in thoughts about that guy's words. The doctor pulled him out of his thoughts, asking, "Is he okay?" He jerked and confusedly answered her that he was fine, after which Kojo entered the infirmary, took some medicine from the cabinet, and when he was about to leave, MC stood in front of him and asked him to wait. Kojo ordered him to step aside, and he bowed to him excitedly, asking him to teach him how to fight. The boy looked him up and down and asked why he needed that. He told him he had injured their leader's younger brother, and they said he would be released in a year. He would definitely come to take revenge on him for that. Kojo asked, "So he wanted to survive?" He excitedly confirmed it. He needed to survive to see his mother again. But Kojo said he couldn't help him. He had his own worries. It would be better for him to just keep quiet and endure, wouldn't it? Jen excitedly grabbed his hand, trying to restrain him, and said that in this place, only strength mattered. Humility alone wasn't enough to survive. That's why he had to become stronger, so he was asking him to teach him how to fight. Kanda watched him through the mirror with pity, and Kojo waved the boy off and said it wasn't his business. This wasn't school for him. He didn't have time to babysit anyone. He pushed Jen aside and said that Kanemoto was cruel, that he had killed a man back in middle school, but thanks to his parents' connections, he managed to escape punishment. In the end, he was arrested due to the public outcry. But the sentence given was laughable. He couldn't handle him. Even if he tried to teach him, it would all be in vain. Let him heal his wounds and come back. And also, let him stay out of his way if he lacks resolve. After that, MC returned to the prison cell, thinking that he had nothing left. What should we do now? There was some noise inside. The guys pounced on Masaki's things and started sorting them out. And when Jen saw that they had trampled on a picture of him with his little brother, he became very angry and rushed towards them, asking what they were doing. He pushed them all aside, snatched his things from them, and told them to stop. They were Masaki's things. They should return them to his family. One of the prisoners kicked him, knocking him to the floor, and told him it was none of his business to go to his corner and tremble there quietly, like always. He was now completely alone anyway. Another guy snatched the photo from his hands and tore it into pieces, saying that this guy was already dead. There was no one left to protect him from the leader. He was finished. The torn photo fell right in front of him. He gritted his teeth and ran out of the prison cell, heading for the yard. The whole time he ran, he mentally begged them to stop. To be oppressed by someone, looked down upon, and ultimately killed, he didn't want that outcome. There in the yard, in the rain, Kojo was now training, squatting with bags of sand on his shoulders. Looking at him, MC decided to live with his head held high, not relying on anyone. He approached him, bowed, and declared that he would do whatever it took, so let him give him another chance. Kojo immediately noticed how his gaze changed and said, he has one condition. His personal time will end in an hour. If he manages to carry all these bags before then, he will train him. Is he ready to do it? He told him to begin, and Jen immediately got to work. He took one bag, went to the other end of the yard, and thought with a smile. He was constantly carrying his mother's bags, or running away from Kanemoto, so he was confident in this kind of thing. He carried several bags and thought that only a minute had passed, and he was already here. He could definitely handle it. Kojo smiled and thought that he was doing well. He hoped he would not disappoint him. 2 more prisoners came out into the yard, and one of them asked what he was doing there in such a downpour. His friend told him to just leave him alone. The guy said he was curious about Kojo's true nature, and his friend replied, he only knew he'd been jailed for assault, and if anyone tried to bother him, he'd beat them half to death. By the way, was he approved for a date? He replied that it wasn't that simple. His turn wasn't coming up, and he hadn't seen his girlfriend for months, and a couple of minutes wouldn't be enough to really talk anyway. His friend asked irritably, what else was he planning to do? Meanwhile, the Kanemoto brothers met in the visiting room. Hiromi angrily put a can of soda on the table and asked when he was going to get rid of him. His brother told him to take his time. A man had recently died, and that idiot Kureha had started meddling in their affairs. So, he needed to deal with Kureha first. Hiromi exclaimed in rage, is that more important than his brother, who lost his nose? Retsu clenched his fist, starting to get angry. His brother jumped up from his seat and asked him to say something. Or is he planning on just abandoning him? Retsu immediately slapped him in the face and told him to shut up. He got beaten by some weakling. Who the hell thinks he is? If something doesn't suit him, why doesn't he deal with it himself? He pulled his brother's hair, and he said that he was wrong. After that, he let him go and said that sometimes you need to be patient. If people start dying one after another, it will attract unnecessary attention. He will keep him alive for only a year, and then make him suffer slowly and painfully. Soon the rain ended. The sun's rays appeared through the clouds, and MC continued to carry the bags. He still had 15 bags left, not much, but he only had 5 minutes. He won't make it. Meanwhile, Kojo smiled. After all, he was doing much better than he thought. But for now, he couldn't keep up with his training. Noticing him leaving, Jen became worried and wondered if he was disappointed. It was logical though. He had no talent anyway. Maybe he hadn't intended to teach him from the start, so that's why he forced him to do it? Maybe if he wasn't capable of anything, he shouldn't try. He stopped, but suddenly the image of his cellmate appeared next to him and asked, was he giving up already? It's for the best. The image changed to Nagao, who said, he should just wag his tail at him, like Miyatani did. His father exclaimed that he was worthless just like his mother. Because of him, his reputation was completely destroyed. And then Hiromi put his hand on his shoulder and asked, did he really touch him? Does he want to become like Kojo? Let him just look at himself in the mirror. MC got nervous, and Hiromi told him to just admit it. He is not capable of anything. All they can do is meekly wait for death. He's just an idiot. Let him finally die. Jen gritted his teeth and whispered that he is not an idiot, and then loudly shouted at them to dare look down on him. Kojo turned to him with interest, and he, putting all his strength, ran to a pile of bags and thought, since he was destined to die anyway, he will fight to the very end. He will change no matter what. Even if he dies in the end, he won't regret it. He sped up. Kojo smirked and thought he was pretty good. MC, meanwhile, put down the bag and thought that there were less than 10 left. He will finish this task, no matter the cost. He began to breathe very heavily. Kojo noticed this and realized that something was wrong. His body was almost at its limit. He walked towards him worriedly, telling him to stop, but Jen couldn't anymore. He had to prove that he was worth something. He had to live, and he would live no matter what. He ran back to the bags. Kojo jumped out in front of him and spread his arms out to the sides, trying to stop him, but he dodged him, and he worriedly exclaimed that if he continued at this pace, he would die. Realizing that he could no longer hear him, he decided to stop him by force. Without paying any attention to what was happening around him, MC ran towards those 3 treasured bags. If he could carry them, everything would be over. He could handle it. But he didn't notice how his vision started to double and his breathing became ragged. Suddenly, Kojo jumped in front of him and punched him in the stomach, causing him to immediately fall over. He wondered why he did that. Kojo said that he was already at his limit, so he had to stop him by force. But Jen wasn't going to give up. Gritting his teeth, he said that this wasn't all. He had to finish this task. The guy sat down next to him and touched his shoulder, saying that he had done more than enough, and he asked, does that mean he agrees to train him? Kojo smiled and told him to rely on him. He would make him the strongest. Hearing these words, MC could finally give himself a break and fainted. When he began to wake up, he saw a man in front of him. He walked toward him in a rage, but couldn't see his face because it was in the shadows. Suddenly, Hiromi's face, without a nose, appeared in front of him and attacked him, vowing to kill him. He jumped out of bed in fear, and the doctor who was checking the IV was terrified. She said he was fine now, but it was simply incomprehensible that he had sunk to this point. Kojo entered the infirmary and said that he had been serious earlier. Konda gave him a displeased look, then left the infirmary and said that she would wait outside. He had 10 minutes. He thanked her for her understanding, and when they were alone, he told him to come here from now on under the pretext of treatment so as not to attract unnecessary attention. He received permission from Dr. Kanda. She would assign them a utility room. Everything must remain a top secret until the end of the special training. Did he understand him? Jen thanked him very happily for his help and promised to give him his all, and Kojo told him to listen to him carefully. He tried, but carrying sandbags was just a warm-up. To be honest, in his current state, he's not even worth discussing. Willpower and determination won't be enough. After that, he left, and Konda returned to treat his wounds. While she was doing this, he sat with a sad face and kept thinking about his words. He tried so hard, but it was still not enough. Noticing how gloomy he had become, she asked if something was wrong. He asked her what kind of person Kojo was, and she asked what exactly he wanted to know. He noted that Kojo was full of mysteries. No matter what he did, he was never punished, and he always kept aloof. He never showed his true colors. She told him that she could only say that he was not a bad person. He came here for his family. Let him ask the rest himself. But there are things in this world that are better for him not to know. She had already warned the guards that he was here. Kojo would be waiting for him in the back room. She smiled, wishing him luck, and as soon as his personal time arrived, MC went to the back room. Once inside, he looked around in surprise and noticed that it was very dark. Kojo, standing in the corner, said, "Blindfold training sharpens his other senses, which will come in handy someday." Jen immediately greeted him excitedly, and he said, first, he needs to learn 2 things. He is forbidden to talk to anyone without his permission, and he is also not allowed to show this place to anyone. He stood at attention, telling him that he understood everything, and asked about the reason. He ignored his question and said, second, let him do everything exactly as he says. He does not intend to answer his questions. First, he'll assess his abilities. He only has 1 minute. MC started doing all the exercises he talked about, jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, and so on. Kojo kept count. He'd done 23 jumping jacks, 6 push-ups, 30 sit-ups, and 2 more pull-ups. This was pathetic. He'd have to adjust his training plan. He ordered him to stop, and Jen immediately grabbed his chest, trying to catch his breath, while Kojo said he was disappointing him. Was yesterday really just a desperate burst of strength? For now, they'll start from the basics. He wants him to do 110 jumping jacks, 20 push-ups and 50 sit-ups in 1 minute, plus 4 more pull-ups in 3 days. MC was surprised. He thought he was teaching him to fight. Kojo looked him over, then suddenly punched him, stopping a few centimeters from his face, and asked, with such a body, could he even dodge an attack, let alone counterattack? He told him to continue training, and he excitedly asked if he could rest. At least 5 minutes? Kojo reminded him. He had told him to do everything as he said, even if his explanation was meager. He was hopelessly weak compared to the others, which is why he had developed this plan for him. From the outside, it may look like a normal training, But for someone like him, lacking both strength and skill, this is the most effective approach. For example, his cellmate. At first glance, he doesn't seem very strong, but to beat him, he only needs to start doing at least 70 push-ups. He asked in surprise. In 1 minute, the guy confirmed it. In his unit, strength dictates the law. If he's not strong, he won't survive. And let him not underestimate Kanemoto. He is merciless and cruel, and always keeps his word. If he can't fight with his own strength, then he will have no future here. His life will turn into a living hell. And even after hearing all this, he still wants to rest? Jen exclaimed that he will do it. He wants to live, so let him continue training him. Kojo said that he has spirit, but let him not talk empty words and not make him regret it later. Since he has decided everything, let him prove it to him in action. What he wants to protect, he must protect at any cost. Did he understand him? MC answered him that he understood everything, and Kojo said, then his special training begins right now. Kojo's remarks were heard even in Kanda's office. She listened to it all and smiled. She thought he would really let him rest, but he is never honest with himself. That's why he is a lone wolf. Time passed. Jen finally finished training and lay down on the floor to rest. Kojo threw some clothes on him, and he was surprised to notice that the uniform was too big for him. He told him to wear them whenever he went out, to hide the changes in his physique. He was in the spotlight now, and if they found out about his training, it would definitely be the end for him, since he was still weak. Did he understand everything? MC nodded confidently, and the guy said, since it came to that, he would enlighten him about the hierarchy in the colony and its leaders. This information was vital if he wanted to survive. He asked, so all the leaders were like Kanemoto? He answered that it was not so. He was the only one obsessed with brute force. Jen inquired how the others became leaders, and Kojo asked with a smirk, did he really think it was possible to rule everyone using only force? Wisdom is necessary to gain the maximum while sacrificing the minimum. That's how they became leaders. They even hold monthly meetings to maintain order here, with the help of security. To avoid information leaks, they meet in the visiting room under the guise of simply exchanging opinions. Since each leader's fighting strength varies, they are always accompanied by a trusted person in case a brawl breaks out. Today is the day of such a meeting. Meanwhile, the three leaders have gathered in the visiting room. Kureha Tetsu, the leader of the Southern Bloc, is accused of manufacturing and selling illegal substances, attempted murder, and assault. He tapped his finger on the table and asked why they couldn't just chat like they usually did. He turned to Kanemoto and said that he could not simply remain silent after something like this happened on his territory. He responded by exclaiming that it was none of his business and asked if he couldn't control himself. Maybe he should be castrated. The last thing he needed was for him to cause trouble for anyone again. Although, on the other hand, if that guy can't fight anymore, poor Kanemoto will be all alone. How sad. Retsu jumped up from the table in a rage, telling him to repeat it, and the leader of the Western Bloc, Kazami Shunsuke, asked them both to calm down. He's accused of fraud, human trafficking, pimping, and concealing a body. He said he heard the Miyatani incident was being thoroughly investigated, which is why Kanemoto was so on edge. Tetsu asked, wasn't he trying to protect Amamori, and he was the only one who wanted him dead? He wondered if Nagao really did it of his own free will. This guy was completely out of control and quite stupid, just like his boss. Retsu couldn't help himself. He grabbed him by the clothes and hissed in rage. Does he want to see blood splatter so badly? Tetsu grabbed a carafe of water from the table and exclaimed, so he decided to take the risk, but he was no match for him. He smashed the carafe on his head, and Kanemoto angrily attacked him with his fists, and Shunsuke asked the two of them to stop. If the guards found out, they would be in trouble. At that moment, the leader of the Eastern Bloc, Narushi Koichi, entered the visiting room just in time. He ordered the two of them to stop, then lit a cigarette and remarked on how ridiculous their behavior was. No matter how many years pass, they're still the same brats. He's charged with organized crime, possession of illegal weapons, assault, and murder. He stepped between them, pushing them apart, and Shunsuke said with relief that he'd saved him. Only he could stop these two. Koichi suggested they begin the meeting. The two exchanged furious glances, and he took his seat, telling Retsu to keep an eye on Nagao and Amamori. He had to do everything to ensure something like this didn't happen again, and he should definitely not kill Amamori. Shunsuke said he understood his feelings for his brother, but he was right. It was better not to look for trouble. Retsu remained silent and clenched his fist, trying to restrain himself, and Koichi told him he'd better be careful. If he dragged the Eastern Bloc into this, he'd be in trouble. Tetsu added, the main thing is for him to keep a close eye on his protege. Retsu remained silent, and Tetsu shrugged, saying he would take his silence as consent. He then clapped his hands joyfully and suggested they end the meeting. They all left, but Retsu remained in the room, so angry that he clutched the glass in his hands and didn't even notice that he'd cut himself. His deputy, Ishida Eiji, ran into the room. He was accused of fraud, incitement, trading in classified information, and desecration of a dead body. He called out to his boss with concern and noted that it seemed the other heads hadn't changed their minds. Wasn't he going to talk to them about Miyatani? He chuckled and said he'd been ordered not to kill Amamori, but that's just ridiculous. No one can stop him. Let him tell everyone they can do whatever they want with Amamori-Gen as long as he stays alive. He wants to see that idiot bleed. Eiji bowed to him, saying he understood everything, and Retsu said that Gen would have very exciting days. Meanwhile, Kojo was telling him about leaders, and he asked if there were different types of bosses, right? Kojo said that Kanemoto was hot-tempered and loved to pick fights, and Kureha Tetsu was cold and ruthless. Kazami Shunsuke constantly monitored the reactions of others, and Narushi Koichi. He fell silent, choosing his words, and said that he simply didn't like conflicts, and his entire Eastern Bloc adhered to this policy too. If problems arose, Koichi would protect him, but if he crossed the line, depending on the severity of the offense, he would personally punish him. He was surprised and asked if he really had such influence, but didn't anyone rebel against him? He answered that Narushi Koichi was the strongest person in the colony. Nothing was known about his past, which is why everyone feared him. He told him everything he needed to know, and now they were getting back to training. Let him start with 20 push-ups, lower his pelvis, and not lift his butt so high. Kanda heard the comments again. She smiled. She hadn't seen him so animated in a long time. She continued working, and mentally told Jen to try harder there. Meanwhile, Retsu called Nagao to his office. His subordinates were crowding outside, worried about their boss. Retsu had already managed to hit Nagao a couple of times, and started scolding him. He made him look like a complete idiot in front of that Kureha. And how was he going to pay for this? He hit him again. He exclaimed in fear that he would drag that Kureha here right now and crush him into dust. His boss became even more angry and asked, does he want to cause him trouble again? He is just pathetic trash. How much longer is he going to embarrass him? He moved toward him to hit him again, but his deputy stood in front of him and asked him to calm down. Anger wouldn't help matters. First, they needed to wait until things calmed down. He had already punished him more than enough. After that, he turned to Nagao and told him to be more restrained in the future. They had more important things to do. Nagao, in fear, asked his boss for forgiveness, and he asked, he knows what will happen if he screws up again, right? He kicked him out of the room, after which he said that it was all because of Amamori. He would answer for everything. He wouldn't kill him, but he wouldn't get off easy either. Eiji promised him to tell the others to give him a warm welcome and make sure he enjoyed every second. This Amamori Gen would be absolutely delighted, and so it all began. MC was cleaning the showers as usual. He stretched a bit because his muscles were still sore, and he wondered if he could even work out today in this condition. Suddenly the water turned on. He immediately turned it off and thought that he had turned off the main valve. The other showers turned on too. He looked around in surprise, not understanding what was happening. And then one of the prisoners slammed his head against the wall and said that the leader told him to pay some attention to him, and from what he saw, they were very obedient guys. His friend noticed a bucket of water nearby, and he grabbed him by the hair, bent him over the bucket and asked, he's tired after work, right? Let him really freshen up. He dunked him in the bucket so hard that he almost suffocated. But that was only the beginning. Jen brought dirty clothes to the laundry and told the others that he had brought things to be washed, but they ignored him, which made him feel uneasy, and he just started throwing clothes into the washing machine in silence. Then 2 inmates came up to him and pushed him into the drum. One of them told his friend to push him in faster, or they wouldn't be able to start the washing machine. MC asked them to stop, so they pushed him in, closed the door, and started the wash cycle. The drum started spinning, and MC banged on the door, asking them to let him out. While the 2 were watching him laughing, the other inmates started worrying about Jen. One of them asked if they had gone too far. Maybe they should turn off the circuit breaker. His friend told him to stay out of it. The boss told him not to kill him, so it was okay. They would stop in time. Their friend looked at the washing machine with pity and concern and called Jen a poor guy. He definitely wouldn't have been able to handle this. MC's mood worsened with each passing day. Even in the cafeteria, they wouldn't give him any peace, constantly pouring boiling water on him. Jen fell, and the guy who deliberately spilled hot soup on him mockingly offered him a hand to help him up. And then his friend threw a tray at Jen with all his might, telling him to watch his step. He slammed his head on the floor and said that the leader told them to make sure he ate. He should eat right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't get any stronger. The guards stopped them and called the guy an idiot. He wanted solitary confinement. If he wasn't going to eat, then he should get out of here. He left, and the guard cast a displeased glance at Jen and said he was always causing trouble and that he should go to the infirmary himself. When he got there, Kanda immediately treated his wounds and indignantly exclaimed that this was too much. At this rate, his body wouldn't last much longer. She turned to Kojo and asked if he even had a plan. He told her that it was inevitable and he wasn't his mommy. Besides, there were some advantages to it. MC was surprised and asked what he meant. He told him that you can learn something even when you're being hit. Learning to understand through pain is the key to becoming stronger. Today, everyone in the cafeteria had openings before they struck. To win, he must learn to notice these openings. Let him watch them while he's being hit. He can't miss such an opportunity. MC asked, confused, how he could even do that. He didn't have the energy to think about it. Kojo placed a hand on his shoulder and said he could teach him, but it would require willpower and determination. Let him choose. Does he want to live the rest of his life under the weight of ridicule, or burn this humiliation into his heart and become someone who makes them tremble with fear. Of course, Jen chose the latter, and the training began. He prepared himself, and then Kojo suddenly pounced on him and hit him in the lower jaw, after which he said, "In a real fight, losing his guard costs him his life. He must not blink. Let him watch carefully when someone attacks. He always reveals his fighting patterns. He needs to figure them out, analyze them, imprint them in his memory. Only then will he be able to dodge." He lunged forward. MC immediately stepped to the side, dodging the blow, and Kojo flexed his wrist, noting that it took him a whole hour to finally dodge at least once. With such success, real battles are out of the question. That's why it makes sense that he was getting beaten up. And don't let him forget what he just taught him. He can't waste this chance. He got dressed and headed for the exit, saying that he needed to take care of something, and once he finished training, he could go. At the end, he turned to him and said with a slight smile that he was doing well and he was no longer a loser. Hearing his praise, Jen was very happy, and then Kojo came out of the back room and asked Kanda to give him eye drops as medicine for the internal bleeding. She asked, "He wasn't seriously going to do this? Was he?" She asked him not to be too harsh on him, to which he replied that being soft wouldn't help him. They didn't have much time. The way they were doing now was too risky, so he needed to become independent as soon as possible. If word got out, he would be finished. She asked, wasn't he afraid that he would break him? He smirked and told her that he wasn't that fragile. Like her, he also believed in him. Time passed. MC diligently followed Kojo's advice and forced his eyes to stay open. If he gets used to this, he'll be able to dodge. Then he needs to quickly track moving objects. He deliberately aimed the hose at his face. The water hit him right in the eyes. It hurt, but he endured it. All this time, while he was being beaten, he gradually learned to observe. During another beating in the cafeteria, one of the prisoners said that he doesn't fight back, so hitting him is no fun at all. Even the guards are already pretending not to notice. Their friend offered them a bet. The target is Amamori. "It's been a while, right?" The guy asked if he wanted to bet on how badly he would get beaten today. He didn't care. The guy waved his hand and said that he didn't mean that at all. Have they really forgotten about that collector? He's getting out of solitary confinement today. He's sure he's been under a lot of stress, so he can't wait to break free. That guy was collecting different body parts. Free time arrived. Jen went out into the yard and the collector was finally released. The guard led Kayama Taketo out of solitary confinement and told him not to even think about getting into trouble again, otherwise he'd be right back in there. Taketo smirked, then immediately went to Jen and challenged him to a fight. The other prisoners saw the collector for the first time and began to wonder who he was. According to the prisoners, Kayama Taketo isn't exactly very strong, but he's completely crazy. Fighting is the only thing he cares about, while he strangles people until they lose consciousness, and then he takes part of their body parts as trophies and keeps them in glass jars. If pure evil really does exist, then Taketo, the living embodiment of it, is a true psychopath. Kayama Taketo approached Jen and introduced himself, smiling and saying it was nice to finally meet him. He wanted his left eye. Will he give it to him? And he'll tell the guards it was just an accident. MC became nervous, and Taketo smirked when there was no answer and then pounced on him, saying, in that case, he'll consider it accepted. After that, the prisoner suggested the others make a bet. Kayama Taketo versus Amamori Jen, odds of 1-to-1. Everyone placed their bets. Meanwhile, Taketo slashed his sharp claws across Jen's chest and left a wound, after which he noticed that he was moving quite quickly. He decided to act differently, and MC began to practice his observation skills. He needed to watch him carefully, calculate the moment, read his fighting patterns. He dodged another blow, but his claws grazed the back of his head, and he thought that this might be a little risky, but he was beginning to understand. Taketo was starting to get annoyed that he couldn't land a hit. He clicked his tongue in displeasure and lashed out, telling him he couldn't expect his luck to continue like this. Jen had memorized everything. He always starts with his left, then tries to choke him with his right hand. If that doesn't work, he closes the distance and tries again. It seems this is the only way to fight he knows. Since he loves to attack so much, then he'll make a bet too. Taketo's hand flashed in front of his face, knocking his glasses off, and then MC punched him in the face, knocking him to the floor. The guy hit his head, knocking him out, and then Jen towered over him and started punching him in the face, shocking the other prisoners. After such a series of punches, the guy no longer moved, and the prisoners asked in surprise, did he lose? They weren't imagining things, were they? That fat guy was probably using doping. They were all very upset, because they had bet money on Taketo to win, but Kojo was very pleased with his student. When Jen came to the infirmary, he started laughing with joy, and Kanda hit him on the head with his finger, telling him not to be so impudent. He could very well have died there. He said with a smile that he simply couldn't believe that he actually won. He hoped at least to survive, but the glasses that his mother bought him were now broken. Kojo went into the infirmary and asked if he had finished his treatment yet. MC immediately jumped up from the couch and bowed to him, thanking him for his help, but he said that he had only defeated the weakest link in this place, and he won only because Taketo was not used to a real fight. It would only get harder for him from now on. There were still plenty of enemies, but Jen was now very motivated and wasn't afraid of this. Kojo handed him a small box and said that it was a gift in honor of his first victory. Starting tomorrow, his training will be even more severe. Let him remember, if he wants to earn respect in this place, he must become a mad dog. After that, he left the infirmary and Kanda discontentedly noted that he could at least praise him occasionally. MC opened his gift. There were contact lenses inside, and the doctor said with a smile that he specially took it for him, said that he would need it. She almost forgot. There is another gift for him. She took a container of food from her bag and said that she grabbed it on her way to work. Because of this, she was almost late. He opened it and was very surprised by what was inside. It was the same spicy tteokbokki that his mother made. It seems that she is doing well. MC immediately burst into tears. He tried it and remembered how she always made this for him as a child and said that it was so delicious. But how did she know about this? Kanda told him she was no ordinary doctor, and she'd also tell him something secret. Kojo had called her before his fight and asked her to pick up the tteokbokki from his mother. He believed in him and had high hopes for him. She gave him a napkin to wipe his tears and told him to enjoy his meal. After all, it was his holiday, and he also needed to rest. He'd be tougher tomorrow. Jen continued eating, while Nagao beat up Taketo, calling him a worthless piece of trash. He couldn't even handle such a weakling. Taketo laughed and said that was exactly what he needed. Amamori Jen was simply the best. He wanted to get to know him better. Nagao, enraged, kicked him in the head, asking why he was grinning. Retsu lit a cigarette and remarked, "This Jen sure knows how to surprise." Nagao asked him to trust this guy to him, but he ignored him and told Eiji to keep an eye on Jen. He wanted to see everything for himself. Was it just a fluke? Or was he no longer the pathetic loser he once was? The next day, MC came to training again. From that day on, Kojo decided to add 2 more types, complex fighting techniques and proper fall techniques. Jen took a stance, showing that he was ready, and then Kojo rushed in. He punched, MC managed to dodge, but the next punch landed right in his chest and then in his stomach, and Kojo told him to tighten his abs. Only then would he be able to protect his organs. After that, he grabbed him by the neck and said that breathing control was also vital. He couldn't move. Let him count how many seconds he could hold his breath. Jen started counting. Kojo suddenly let go of him, and he took a breath, and then pretended to punch him in the face, and MC couldn't even react to it. He said, when he can't breathe, time seems to slow down and all his senses become dull. The moment he finally takes a breath, his body goes numb, and that's when he's most vulnerable to attack. He asked, what if he's attacked? Kojo advised him to control his heartbeat. If he succeeded, his breathing would return to normal. If he wanted to become the strongest, he had to use willpower to subjugate his own body. He needed to understand how the human body worked. Only then would he be able to deliver truly effective strikes. He began showing him where each bone was, and told him to go to a doctor and get an anatomy atlas so he could visually memorize everything. This would greatly help him during the fight. He sharply elbowed him in the chest and said that if he didn't learn this, he would simply be swinging his fists blindly. For example, if you pin your opponent during an attack and knee them in a vulnerable spot, you can inflict massive damage. Time passed, the training continued, and Jen absorbed Kojo's every piece of advice, growing stronger and leaner with each passing day. When he finally managed to rip a punching bag apart with his knee, Kojo praised him, and throwing him some bandages, said he was now fully prepared for fighting. The first opponent was crucial, and his cellmate would be perfect. He had to defeat him, becoming a mad dog that everyone would fear. MC wrapped his hands in bandages. He was about to start his first fight that evening. The guard warned all the prisoners that free time would soon end and that they should return to their cells immediately. As Jen walked there, he remembered Kojo's words. He needed to choose a place, a time, and a method. He didn't care if he lost, but he had to use what they had practiced. Now Jen had to think carefully about whether to fight one-on-one or in full view. Entering the prison cell, he saw the cellmate, a suspicious clothes manager, and a naked Fujino on his bed, who said he was a bit early today. He was indignant and asked what he had forgotten on his bed, and Kojo laughed, telling him not to be so greedy. He was just borrowing it for a while. He put his pants on and stood up, and the MC furiously lifted the blanket and, seeing splashes of an unknown liquid on the bed, immediately let go of the fabric in disgust, and the guy laughed, saying that newbies always have the funniest reactions. The cell leader said that he just needed to wash his hands, but he made a big deal out of it. Jen went to the sink and began furiously scrubbing his hands, and the cell leader came up behind him and hugged him, saying that there were only men around here. They should help each other. If he gets protection for this, then it's a small price to pay, don't you think? The MC was absolutely furious. He abruptly turned around and hit him in the face with his elbow, telling him to get away from him. The cell leader staggered. He immediately pounced on Jen, asking what he was doing, and then Jen quickly jumped back and dodged his blow, and he remarked that it was pretty good, and it looks like he'll have to take him seriously. He lunged forward. MC blocked his punch and thought he had incredible strength. Just one punch, and his arm was already numb. The guy asked how he thought he became the cell leader. He hates sucking up to anyone. If he were truly useless, he would end up like him and Miyatani, which is to say, dead. Jen blocked his next punch and told him to shut up, then grabbed his wrist and twisted it sharply, telling him not to dare insult Masaki. The guy's bones cracked. He screamed in pain and shouted that he finished him. And while they were fighting, Nagasawa asked if the elder was always such a weakling. Fujino told him to shut up. They didn't need any extra problems. Meanwhile, MC broke through the cell leader's block, exposing his weak spot, and then swung his kick at him under the knee. Kanda taught him that the knee joint contains the cruciate and collateral ligaments, that if a strong blow hits them, they will tear and the pain will be unbearable. Jen struck the guy right there, causing him to immediately fall, but MC caught him and grabbed him, then began punching him in the head. Kojo had taught him this. First, he needs to immobilize the opponent and then immediately hit the vital points, breaking his will to fight. He hit even harder. The guy screamed and Fujino offered to help Nagasawa. If he lost, they would be in trouble too. After that, he pounced on Jen. He quickly noticed this and hit him in the neck, causing him to immediately stop. Nagasawa picked up an iron basin and was about to hit him in the head, but he gave him a threatening look and asked, "Does he want to get beaten up too?" He immediately walked away, smiling awkwardly. And while Jen was out cold, the cell leader took out a hidden shiv and, calling Jen an idiot, slashed him across the chest, asking, "Didn't anyone teach him not to relax until the end of the fight?" MC clenched his teeth, feeling a burning pain. After which the cell leader jumped to his feet and Jen, grabbing his arm, said threateningly, "The one who will die will be him." He pulled him. It hit him in the shoulder, causing him to release the shiv and fall. Since he was no longer moving, MC decided to stop. He slowly got up and wiped the sweat from his face, and the two trembled with fear. And then he declared, "From now on, he will be the cell leader." The warden walked around the block, announcing lights out in 10 minutes. By this time, the other prisoners had already arrived, and Jen still could not believe his victory. His cellmate passed him and brushed his shoulder, breaking his train of thought. MC, seeing Fujino and Nagasawa making his new bed, was surprised and said they shouldn't do that. The guys told him that those were the rules, and he shouldn't relax just because he was now the cell leader. A protruding nail always gets hammered down. He asked what happened to the cell leader who lost, and Fujino asked if he was really worried about him. The fate of losers is always pitiful, and besides, he won. He no longer had to hide his muscles under those baggy clothes. In any case, now they'll always be picking fights on him. At that moment, the lights went out and the guards announced lights out. Jen sat down on his bed and thought that he didn't know what happened to cell leaders after they were removed. Fujino said that real hell awaited them. In this colony, you can only rise with your fists, which means his next opponent is the boss. He must become stronger, for Masaki's sake, but he still lacks strength. He has a lot to learn from Kojo. Everyone fell asleep, and the warden passed suspiciously close to Eiji's prison cell. It turns out he passed a note to one of the prisoners. After reading it, he immediately ran to the boss and passed it on to him, saying that he had lost. Eiji got angry and asked, "Has that stray dog finally started baring his teeth?" News reached the South Block as well, and Tetsu laughed loudly and said that Jen was doing much better than he thought. Kanemoto is definitely tearing his hair out right now. The West Block also heard about it, and Shunsuke became very interested in the guy, and soon news reached the East Block. The warden knocked on the cell door and informed Koichi that Jen had defeated the cell leader. He asked if there were any injured, and he answered that Jen was okay, but the cell leader was seriously injured. He thanked him for the news, and the warden left, wishing him good night. After that, Koichi went to the window and thought that this would turn into a real headache. Morning came. MC came to the cafeteria and everyone started glancing at him and whispering. Everyone's reaction was completely different from after his victory over Kiyama. Was it because this time he was fighting for rank? Shunsuke suddenly appeared next to him. He crouched down and asked, "His name is Amamori Gen, right? And he is the leader of the West Block, Kazami Shunsuke." He asked if it hurt him to walk around the North Block like that openly. He smiled and told him that he was friends with Kanemoto, so everything was fine. However, he would have been furious if Tetsu had shown up here. MC immediately asked him what he wanted. He clearly hadn't come here for small talk. Shunsuke whispered that Kanemoto wouldn't let him go so easily, but he saw potential in him, so he decided to lend him a helping hand. He asked what exactly he meant, and Kanemoto said he'd protect him if he became his spy. He was the block leader after all. It was easy for him. After some thought, Jen firmly refused, and angrily asked if he thought he could handle Retsu alone. He replied that the fact that he was trying to recruit someone who was being watched so closely meant he had no allies at all. He was right? Then how could he even help him? If he was killed first, he wouldn't have time to help him. Shunsuke was very indignant. He slammed his hand on the table in rage and left, and the other prisoners began to discuss it. Why was he talking to the block leader like that? Has he completely lost his fear? The spies from the South Block immediately rushed to report everything that had happened to the boss. One of the prisoners heard this and asked his friend why he was getting so much attention for defeating some cell ward. He replied that the fat whiner he thought would die right away had actually defeated him. Of course, the cell ward's rank was low, but for such a loser to win was quite an achievement. After breakfast, MC went back to his cell, but Koichi caught up with him and said, as far as he remembers, they had never met before. He is the leader of the Eastern Bloc. After MC spoke with him, he went to the courtyard, but accidentally bumped into someone and immediately apologized to him, and it turned out to be Eiji, who said that he was finally able to meet him. Jen became wary and asked what was going on, and one of his subordinates exclaimed with displeasure. Why was he looking at him so insolently? In front of him was Ishida Eiji, the deputy boss of the Northern Bloc. MC became nervous and thought, another one? Could Kanemoto really be behind all this? Eiji said that the cell leader he defeated was his subordinate. Jen immediately understood everything and got into a fighting stance. But the guy told him not to expect him to fight him personally. That would not happen. He told his subordinates to teach him a lesson. The two of them pounced on Jen. He parried the first one's punch, but couldn't take the second one, which is why he missed the next punch, and they drove him into a corner. MC barely managed to parry the punch, then the second guy hit him under the knee, and he realized that things were bad. After that, the guy fell on him with his whole body, knocking him to the floor, and to keep him from getting up, they began to hold him in place. After that, AG asked how it felt to be unable to cope with even a couple of his subordinates. The cell leader he beat up was the most worthless of them all. Defeating such trash only makes him more trash. He is a big-hearted man, but he does not forgive those who make him lose face. Because of him, he became a laughingstock. It is only natural that he should return the favor. So let him enjoy. After that, they left. Jen got up. He had no idea that the gap in strength was so huge. He only trained for one-on-one fights and has no idea how to face a crowd. The path to the top. Is it really so unattainable? When he returned to his cell, he saw his former cell leader sitting on the floor, who immediately glared at him. He approached him, didn't know what to say, and looked away, lost in thought. Perhaps he should stop. He probably doesn't even want to look at him. He has pride too. Nagasawa and Fujino exchanged ominous glances. The guy called the former cell leader by number and ordered him to get up. He needed to go to the bathroom. He understands what that means, right? He looked at him in rage and exclaimed, "Does he even know who he's talking to?" Nagasawa immediately hit him on the head and said with a smirk that he was now usually a prisoner, an honorable duty available only to them. Fujino also joined in the mockery and asked why he was looking at them like that. He was nothing but trash. The guy clenched his teeth in anger, got on all fours, and Nagasawa told him to keep his balance. Otherwise, if he fell, he would kill him. Everyone else laughed, and the MC immediately ordered them to stop. He grabbed Nagasawa by the shoulder, preventing him from climbing on the guy, and said that it was over. Let them deal with their needs on their own now. Fujino reminded him that this was the rule. He did whatever he wanted to them. He answered him that it didn't matter. He was the senior in the cell here now, so he makes the rules. He would not allow others to be humiliated, and if something didn't suit him, then let them try to resolve it by force. Of course, no one dared, and Fujino let out hysterical laughter and said that it was just a joke. Number 6720 called out to Jen and indignantly asked who asked him to feel sorry for him. He would rather die than put up with this. He told Nagasawa to do it. Everything was fine. He admits that he lost, but he who laughs last, laughs best. Nagasawa put his foot on him and told Jen that if he says everything is fine, then it must be so. He's right? MC was just in shock and he went to the infirmary to take out his anger. He was beating this poor punching bag and thinking about it. He just wants to end these rotten rules. It will be better for everyone. Why don't they understand that? Konda came into the back room, handed him a towel, and said that Kojo had some business. He looks kind of upset. Did something happen? He told her everything and said that he just doesn't understand. It would be better for everyone. She said that no matter how right he thought he was, to them it looks like a denial of the only norm they knew. They can't accept it. If he wants to change something, he has no choice but to keep fighting. Only by becoming the block leader can he make this a reality. Jen noted, this means he'll have to try 1,000 times harder than he did now. He wanted to learn more, but Kojo wasn't around right now. She asked what exactly he wanted to learn, and he told her he wanted to learn how to fight multiple opponents at once. She told him with a smile that it was quite simple. You just need to run away. Those who give chase will inevitably lose their guard, and then you need to hit them where they hurt. She suddenly turned sharply to him and slapped him with her palm, stopping right in front of his face, and said that at that moment, he needed to deliver a crushing blow. He was even surprised at how fast she was, and she, noticing his reaction, pulled the towel from his shoulders and, with a smile, reminded him that she had told him she wasn't some ordinary doctor. They were done for today. He had to go to work soon. If he was late, his points would be deducted. She called him cell leader and wished him luck, after which MC went to work. In the prison colony, prisoners perform community service alongside their cellmates. Each prisoner is awarded points based on their diligence and behavior. By accumulating a certain number of points, they can earn the right to visit their families, so everyone takes this extremely seriously. However, the management and distribution of work is entrusted to the boss, the person most trusted by the leader. In other words, within the established rules, the boss's word is law, and the boss of the North Block is Ishida Eiji. Before he began, the warden warned him that this was his first community service as a cell leader, so he should listen carefully. If even one of them fails, everyone's points will be reduced. Did he understand? After receiving the answer, he opened the door and ordered everyone to get to work. Jen thought that if things continued like this, he would soon be able to see his mother. He wondered how she was. As he followed the guard, his cellmates stood to the side, and Nagasawa quietly told them all that AG was going to do the same thing to Jen, so they shouldn't even think about interfering. They all agreed with him, and the guys standing in the sterilization area saw Jen coming and got ready. He approached them with a cart and said he needed sterile trays, and the inmate carefully pulled a stack of trays out of the equipment and put them in his cart, warning him that they had just pulled them out and that it was about 200 degrees there. MC rolled the cart further, but the wheel jammed and it no longer moved. He told the guys to give him another cart but they told him that they didn't have any spares, so they couldn't help him, and that he should look for one himself. He turned to his cellmates, offering to move the trays to their cart, but Nagasawa said that there was no room for anything else. Several prisoners passed by him and asked, "What's wrong? Was he chickening out? This is so disappointing." Jen was furious. He immediately realized that these idiots were doing this on purpose. He grabbed the guy in the sterilization zone by the clothes, and his cellmates immediately approached him, trying to stop him, because of him, their points would be lowered. Another prisoner immediately called the others here, saying that Jen had gone crazy, and they crowded around him and started verbally attacking him. MC wondered, why so many of them? And where are the guards? One of the prisoners understood what he was thinking, and said that the guards were on break, so they were here alone. Jen understood everything. AG had set this all up. He couldn't handle such a crowd alone. He let go of the guy, then the thug immediately grabbed his head and forced him toward a cart with hot trays, saying that the cart was broken, so he should carry everything himself. And don't move if you don't want your head shoved inside. While trying to resist, MC accidentally grabbed the hot metal, after which the guy let go and told him to move. Or does he want his face burned? Jen had no choice but to pick up the hot trays and drag them through his teeth to the table. The inmates, watching him, laughed and told him to be careful, not to drop them, or they'd have to wash them again. He carried all the trays to the cafeteria, asked the guy standing there to double-check the numbers, and he quickly counted everything and thanked him with a smile for his work. Seeing the burns on his hands, he became very worried and told the guard about it and offered to take him to the infirmary. He just waved his hand, indicating that he had permission, and then they went out into the corridor. MC looked around and immediately noticed they weren't heading in the direction of the first aid station. He stopped, and the guy turned to him and asked, "What's wrong?" He replied that the first aid station was in the wrong direction. What was he even planning? Several guys approached them, and that prisoner told him that he planned to help him with treatment. That was obvious. They grabbed him and said that these were AG's orders, and that he shouldn't even hope for escape. Meanwhile, Fujino was watching all this and worriedly asked if this was too much. His friend asked if he was going to question AG's methods, or if he wanted to experience it himself. He excitedly shook his head from side to side, and Nagasawa said if he doesn't want to get hurt, he should keep his pity to himself. Meanwhile, those guys took Jen to a refrigerator and dragged him somewhere. He tried to break free, but one of the prisoners told him to stop whining. The guards don't look in such places. Well, now he'll get a gift from AG. Let him properly heal his wounds. They dragged him to a pipe and a red valve, which was obviously very cold. They forced him to touch it, and he immediately felt a searing pain from the cold, and he clenched his teeth, thinking he was a fool. What an idiot he had been. Violence is everything here. Force is the only law, and he had to accept it. Otherwise, he wouldn't survive. They made him hold his hand on the valve for a few seconds, then forcibly tore it off, leaving pieces of skin behind. He screamed in pain, called them idiots through his teeth, and thought he had tried so hard all this time, and yet he had to continue to endure this. So be it. No matter how hopeless it was, he would fight until the death. He clenched his wounded hand into a fist and lunged at the guy holding him, then punched him in the face with all his might, and the other guys immediately pounced on him. He forced himself to remember Konda's instructions. He needed to start running immediately. Then the enemy would definitely relax. He blocked a blow from one of the prisoners and hit him in the vulnerable spot with one decisive blow. Hearing the noise, the warden immediately came to the refrigerator and exclaimed, "What are they doing here?" He dispersed everyone, telling them to get back to work. If they made even one more sound, they would not get any points today. The prisoners had no choice but to obey him. And then the guy who brought Jen here told him that next time he would not be so lucky. MC gritted his teeth and thought that the guards saved him. IG is trying to harass him, hiding behind work. Unlike Nagao, he is very cunning, so he cannot defeat him with strength alone. Now he wonders what he will do next. When Koichi came to him, he said that there is a way to avoid bullying, even if he does not become stronger. Let him go to his east block, he will protect him. Now Jen wondered what he should do. Time passed. MC trained with Kojo as usual, but he was constantly lost in his thoughts and took his punches. When he fell again, Kojo noticed that he was so thoughtful. Did something happen? He apologized to him. It was all because he was denied a meeting with his mother because he didn't have enough points. If he tried harder, maybe they would see each other soon. That's what the guard said. Now he asked Kojo if his meeting with his mother was cancelled because he was weak. He answered that most likely it was true. It was sickening to look at him now, but he had a weapon, a strong will that will not waver before anyone. He is not fast like a leopard, and not strong like a bear, but this willpower will transform him into a wolf. He patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile that diligence always bears fruit. Someday he will definitely meet someone he wants to protect. He remembered his mother, her smile, confidently clenched his fists, and exclaimed that he was right. He just needed to get stronger. His mood immediately lifted and he stood up, suggesting that he continue. They should strive for the top. Time passed. Nagao came out of the prison cell and thought that this AG was pulling his cunning tricks. It seemed that even the head honcho was pleased. Meanwhile, Jen came out of the freezer and thought only about winning the fight. For that he needed to soberly assess the situation. At this time, Nagao thought that he had been deeply humiliated because of this AG. Maybe he should beat someone up to let off some steam. They were walking straight towards each other, and when Nagao saw him, he smiled and asked, "Is that really their new cell leader? Is he having fun?" MC gave him a displeased look and walked past him, and he turned to him in rage and exclaimed, "And he had the nerve to ignore him?" His subordinate worriedly told him not to touch him. He couldn't do that, or Eiji would find out. He hit him, telling him not to dare say that name, and walked towards Jen, declaring, "He will prove that he is much stronger." MC immediately turned to him, blocked his punch, and his hand trembled from his incredible strength. If he only defended himself, he would lose. Kojo said that a person's weak point is the lower jaw. He would hit there. He threw a punch, deciding not to give him a chance to counterattack, and lunged, but he missed. And then Nagao took advantage of this and grabbed his arm, then kneed him in the face, causing him to stagger and have to step back. The bully asked, "Is that all he can do?" Gathering his strength, Jen ran towards him, crouched down and swung at him on the inside of the knee, causing him to immediately fall, and he realized that his weak point is his legs. Leaning against the wall, Nagao stood up and clicked his tongue in annoyance, asking if he had underestimated him. He ordered the guys to finish him off, and they all pounced on him, and while he was blocking one of the blows, Nagao attacked him from behind and hit him. He nervously clenched his teeth and thought there were too many of them. Then he noticed that the door to the cold storage room was opened and immediately ran there. Nagao exclaimed after him, "Does he think he can run?" He disappeared behind the doors. Nagao motioned for the guys to stay there and grinned, saying that if he wanted to play hide-and-seek, then he didn't mind. But this was a deadly game. If he caught him, he was finished. He entered the cold storage room, carefully walked to the center and told him not to hide. He heard quiet footsteps, but since it was dark, he couldn't see Jen, so he punched him in the face with all his might, ran past him, and ran out of the cold storage room. Nagao wanted to chase him, but when he saw him closing the door, he yelled in rage at him not to dare do that. He slammed the door right in front of him, locked it, and Nagao loudly screamed that he would send him to hell. The cold storage room was minus 150 degrees Celsius, and Nagao had a hard time there. Soon, news of this incident spread throughout the colony. A guy in the yard mockingly told his friends how Jen simply slammed the door in his face, and all they could do was listen to the pathetic screams of that thug. Another group of guys approached them and ordered them to get out of there because this was their territory, and the guy mockingly said, "These are the subordinates of that frostbitten loser." Did he even manage to thaw out? Otherwise, he might not even be able to go to the bathroom without problems. His friends laughed, and the prisoners from the other group angrily called them idiots and exclaimed that their boss was only angry because EG was pulling tricks behind his back, while they themselves always acted like brothers. He exclaimed in response, "That's a bold statement for someone whose boss lost to a newbie." They continued arguing, and the prisoners standing aside said that because of that incident, EG's dogs had completely lost their fear. Nagao would definitely try to get even, and it wouldn't end well for Jen. Evening came, all the prisoners ran somewhere, and MC stopped one of them, asking what happened. He pushed him away, telling him to stay out of his way, and ran on, and Jen wondered if they were heading to his cell. They crowded at the entrance. MC ordered everyone to disperse, and was surprised to see the former cell leader sitting on the floor and nervously tearing his hair. He asked what had happened, and Koichi told him that Nagao had taken out his anger on him because he couldn't reach him. Jen asked what he was doing there, and he told him that he was still waiting for his answer to his proposal. He was only able to grow up because this guy hadn't kept an eye on him, and that was what had provoked Nagao's rage. He begged AG for help, but it was all in vain. He was considered useless. Fear and despair change people. That's what happens to those who lose their place in the colony. The guards came and ordered everyone to disperse. This wasn't a circus for them. One of them approached the former cell leader to take him away, but he waved him off and exclaimed that it wasn't intentional, that he didn't see anything. That's the truth. The warden ordered his colleagues to seize him immediately, and the guy, in a panic, asked them to wait so he could prove it. He had taken out his own eyes with his own hands and showed them to them with a smile, saying that he really couldn't see anything, so it was not his fault. The warden immediately contacted his colleagues on the radio and ordered them to immediately bring a doctor here. The guy had gone crazy. MC was enraged by this sight and said it was absurd. Why does the person who drove him to this state remain unpunished? Does power really give the right to do whatever you want? Koichi confirmed this. That's why everyone strives for the top, but the fall is always miserable and humiliating. He could end up like that too. He wants to see his family, right? He can do that in the Eastern Bloc without getting stronger. Jen said, "Let's say they protect him for a few years, but what will happen after that? He has to protect his mother, and Kanemoto won't leave him alone. If he's weak by then, how can he fight them off? He doesn't need temporary peace. He needs even more strength." Koichi shook his head with a smile, then told him to be careful. Nagao will definitely want revenge. He's very dangerous when he's angry. He waved goodbye and said his offer still stands. Let him come to the Eastern Bloc if he wants. The next day, during their free time, everyone gathered in the courtyard. The warden came and ordered everyone from the South Bloc to return to their cells. As their free time was over, and as they were leaving, Nagao gave them a disdainful look and said that even Shibahara was here. They had been taking him for a complete idiot lately. Kai Shibahara is the general of the South Block. He was locked up for robbery and cruelty to animals. The guys from the South Block started to be led away, and Nagao wanted to let off some steam on someone, but his subordinate said that now was not the best time. The boss had just warned him. He exclaimed that the main thing is that the victim is not Jen. He walked towards the other prisoners and exclaimed that today he would grind them into dust. He would show them who is boss here, so that they would never dare to mock him again. He waited until Kai passed him, put his foot in front of him so that he would brush it, and then he called out to him in displeasure and said that he had dirty all his shoes. Kai remarked that it was a pathetic provocation, but he didn't want to fight him. The bully smirked and said that he actually wanted to fight him, then punched him in the face and exclaimed, "Does he think he'll get away with this?" The supervisor immediately intervened and ordered him to stop, and he told him that they were just doing special training here. Kai promised to beat him until he died, and then dealt him a few blows. Then one of his subordinates grabbed Nagao and started punching him in the stomach. The bully was furious, calling him a coward, grabbed the guy who was holding him, and threw him right at Kai. After that, he put his foot on the guy's face and mockingly asked, "Are there any weaklings in the South Block?" His words enraged the other prisoners, who all swore to finish him off and rushed into a fight. The warden, of course, tried to stop them, but he couldn't handle such a crowd. Watching everyone surround him, Nagao grinned and said that things would soon get fun. Then a siren blared throughout the colony. Kanemoto, who was currently supervising the work, ordered everyone to stop and sent AG to investigate the noise. Jen and Kojo were currently training, and the latter decided to go see what was going on. There was a brawl going on right now. The guys had long since fallen ill from the guards, leaving only Nagao and Kai. The thug, smiling, charged at him, punched him in the face, causing him to retreat, and laughed at him, asking, "Is that all he can do?" Kai wiped away the blood and called him an idiot, and then the guards ran up to them and ordered them to stop. Nagao laughed loudly and exclaimed that they were all so pathetic, a real rabble of weaklings. Meanwhile, Kojo was heading to the yard. Koichi was waiting for him at the corner, and he asked, was he here again because of Jen, or did he just come to look at them? He answered that he came to see him. He understands everything himself, right? What they are planning is very dangerous. They must not involve Jen in this. Kojo told him that it was his choice, and he asked, but this was exactly the decision he was waiting for, right? He understands everything, but he should not drag outsiders into this. It is not too late. You should not let him go down his path. Some time passed after this conversation. MC was practicing punches on the punching bag as usual, and Kojo noticed that he was all fired up. Did the victory over Nagao give him confidence? He told him that he wouldn't call it a victory. The gap between them was still huge, and he needed to train hard if he wanted to defeat him in a fair fight. Kojo asked, did he know that he had made him really angry? He told him that he knew that, but running away was just postponing the problem, so he had to become stronger, no matter the cost. Besides, if he couldn't protect himself, he wouldn't be able to protect anyone else. Kojo wondered if he was that simple-minded or just an idiot. He said that since he had decided that Nagao was his next target, they would begin a special training regimen. Let him be ready. They would start tomorrow. MC was full of energy and agreed. Meanwhile, the senior supervisor, Katsumata Shiro, threw Nagao into the isolation cell and told Kanemoto that he hadn't been looking after his men well lately. If they caused him any more trouble, he knew what awaited him, right? Nagao furiously told them to let him go. Why was he the only one here? Retsu got really angry and ordered him to shut up, and Shiro gave the big guy a disgruntled look and said that if he were in his place, he would make sure he could never cause trouble again. He walked past Retsu and said that it would be better for him too. Let him apologize to Kureha. That was his boss's order. After that, he left and closed the door, and Retsu decided to teach his subordinate a lesson in discipline. Meanwhile, in the South Block, Kai went to his boss, and he said that after what happened, Kanemoto would never forgive Nagao. So he did a good job. Kai smirked and told him that the guy was a complete idiot. He just needed a little push. Tetsu smiled and said that everything was going just fine. If they finished him off, Kanemoto would lose his strongest bodyguard, and that would be their chance. Meanwhile, Retsu beat Nagao so badly that he wet himself and shouted in rage that it was to protect the reputation of the Northern Bloc. Those who can't handle even one brat are a real disgrace. Retsu hit him again and told him to shut up. Because of him, they now have to bow at Kureha's feet. If he's so useless, it would be better if he died before he started causing problems. He's already sick of him. All his punches caused Nagao to fall. Then Eiji put his hand on his boss's shoulder and said that if he killed the general, it would cause problems. He would take the apology himself. It's not proper for a boss to bow to someone like Kureha. Retsu asked doubtfully, what if the principal isn't satisfied with this? The guy smirked and told him not to worry. He had a great idea. But Katsumata was right. It was better not to make things worse. Still, Nagao was hard to control. Retsu asked, Jen has gained strength, right? Then they'll let him get even stronger, and when the time comes for him to fight this guy, it would be best if they both lose, or ideally die. Then, even if there's an investigation, it'll be considered a personal feud, and he can pretend he knows nothing. Fighting lessons with Nagao began tomorrow. Kojo said his main weapon is his strength. He relies solely on that. To win, he'll need speed and an observer. If he doesn't find his weak spot, he won't stand a chance. Not just during battle, but when he walks, when he eats, even when he breathes. Every little detail can be the key to victory. MC paused for a moment, after which Konda brought an anatomical dummy into the back room and said, with Nagao's build, his heart and lungs are under tremendous strain, meaning he's incapable of moving at a fast pace for long. First, he needs to start moving constantly, so he wastes his energy. Once he runs out of steam, the power of his punches will wane. Then he needs to provoke him. Such a big guy has trouble controlling himself when enraged, and he'll start to open up, which is when he needs to strike. Furthermore, people like him have an extremely unstable center of gravity, so they can't change direction quickly. Jen also noticed this. His lower body was always vulnerable, and the doctor said, with this tactic, he can win, and he also needs to learn how to take punches properly. He must withstand at least 3 direct hits, because if the opponent knocks him out in one blow, everything else will be meaningless. Kojo demonstrated all this to him. MC fell from his blows, and then the doctor helped him up, telling him not to lose heart. If he could withstand Kojo's attacks, he could defeat Nagao too. Kojo glanced at the photo in his hands and noted that he was progressing faster than he expected. Nagao would be in isolation for the next 2 weeks. This was his chance. If he put in enough effort, his chances of winning would increase. Training ended, Jen was about to leave, but Kojo stared at him strangely, as if about to say something. MC turned to him, asking what was wrong, and he told him to just get some rest. When he left, Konda asked if he was going to give him the photo. He told her that he would hold off on it for now. He didn't want to ruin his mood. She frowned and asked what he meant. This didn't fit at all with how he asked her to find out about his sister. He told her that it was for his own sake, that when fighting such a strong opponent, it was better not to burden yourself with unnecessary emotions. She asked why that was. He shouldn't force this on Jen. Even if he sees himself in him, forcing him to go down the same path is wrong. It's too selfish. Night fell. Kojo went to your cell, but he couldn't fall asleep because he remembered their words about selfishness. When he was little, he and his sister saw some man easily beat up some guys. Then he ran up to him and grabbed his clothes, excitedly asking how someone could become so strong. He wants to be like him. The man agreed to make him the strongest, but he had to part with his family, because as long as his feelings controlled him, he would not be able to become strong. His sister was taken away by women, and he remained with that man, and now he realized that he really was selfish if he did the same to Jen. The next day, he gave him the photo. Seeing his mother at work, his heart sank. Kojo said that he asked an acquaintance to check on her. As far as he could see, she was fine. MC was very happy to see her. He grabbed Kojo's hand and excitedly thanked him and asked if his acquaintance had tried her food. Her food really was very tasty. He asked him to calm down a bit, and the doctor smiled and thought, she will have to tell Narushi that he has become much softer. After that, they started the lesson. Kojo drew Jen's future goals on the board and said, the best way to become stronger is a territory fight, and he will have to defeat all the cell leaders in the North Block. He pointed at one of them and said, for example, this guy acts tough, but in reality, he's a common coward. As soon as there's a whiff of danger, he immediately calls his friends. So let him prepare not only for one-on-one fights, he should learn to defeat several opponents at once. He's counting on him. And so MC went into battle. He took off his shirt, bandaged his hands, and challenged the prisoners to a fight. The fight in the street continued. The protagonist clutched his shoulder. The wound was making itself felt. At that very moment, Dean stepped toward him, his face contorted with rage. Dean shouted, what, does he think he's some kind of strong man? He thought he could stand up to the 3 of them? He shouldn't make him laugh. The protagonist didn't flinch and coldly snapped, don't be so impudent. Someone from the crowd barked, come on, let him say he gives up, or does he want his arm broken? The protagonist frowned and asked again with a mocking intonation, he gives up? He slapped himself on the shoulder, as if shaking off irritation, and firmly said, such a word isn't in his vocabulary. Let one of them say it themselves. Set an example. Jack turned purple, the veins bulged in his temples, and he howled, what an idiot he is. He'll finish him off. He clenched his fists and lunged forward, throwing a punch. The protagonist ducked sharply, dodging the fist. At the same moment, he noticed movement from behind. Dean swung his leg. The shadow of the leg flashed in front of his face, but the protagonist managed to grab it with both hands, yank it forward, and throw the attacker over himself. For a second, the protagonist froze, sucking in a breath, and mentally pulled himself up. Stop, there's another one somewhere. And then the bald one snuck up from behind. A fist flashed through the air and slammed into the protagonist's face. The blow shook him, causing him to stagger. He covered the bruised area for a moment, gritting his teeth, and the thought flashed through his mind. Damn. A couple more of those and he'll pass out. He needs to find their weak points and knock them out one by one. He glanced at the bald one. This one is strong. He only hits with the back of his fist, which means he values strength over precision. He looked at Dean. This one relies on his legs, fast but predictable. And finally at Jack. Strong but easily angered. There it was, his weak link. Dean lunged forward again and threw a kick. The protagonist ducked under it, simultaneously approaching Jack, who was already swinging. He put all his fury into the kick and caught the protagonist in the stomach. Jack roared, triumphant. How could he? But the protagonist didn't have time to respond. The bald one was already approaching from behind, raising his fist. He struck, but at the last moment the protagonist dodged to the side, and the bald one's fist crashed right into Jack's face. The bald one screamed, "Don't you dare!" It was too late. Jack grabbed his face, breathing hoarsely. The protagonist darted forward, and a thought flashed through his mind. Now, he hooked Jack's leg, knocking him to the ground, and immediately followed up with an elbow to the face. Looking back at the others, the protagonist chuckled to himself. It's not over yet. With a quick movement, he unwound part of the bandage from his hand and rushed towards Dean. In one step, he was at his side, sharply wrapped the bandage around his neck and yanked it towards himself, knocking his opponent to the ground. The bald man rushed to help, throwing out a fist, but the protagonist managed to intercept his hand and immediately landed a blow from below upwards, right on the chin. The bald man recoiled, clutching the bruised area. Dean, already sitting on the ground, rubbed his neck and muttered dully, "What should they do? He's stronger than they thought." The bald man gritted his teeth and muttered, "There's no point in thinking about this. There's no way to escape." He clicked his tongue in irritation, then rushed into the attack again. The bald man followed him, and the thought flashed through his head, "We need to push together. There will be no second chance." The protagonist didn't try to block every blow. He retreated, catching the rhythm, and waited, thinking, first, knock his center of gravity off balance. Deprive him of his support, let him lose his balance. When Dean lunged forward again, the protagonist slid to the side and landed a precise knee strike. The opponent's coordination failed, and at the same second, the protagonist added a sweep, and then a sharp jab from behind, knocking Dean to the ground. The bald man hissed through his teeth, "This can't be." He rushed into the attack again, shouting, "There's no way he'll lose to scum like them." The protagonist put out his hands, blocking the onslaught, and for a moment felt the power imbued in each of his blows, thinking, what power? But if he hits with all his might, he loses his balance, so he needs to lure him out. Let him open up. He lunged forward, provoking him, and as soon as the bald man put all his weight into the swing, the protagonist stepped inside the range, struck the vulnerable spot, and immediately continued the series, not giving his opponent time to recover. He thought victory is his. The crowd, who had been watching silently until then, suddenly opened their mouths. Someone whispered incredulously, "He's just a common prisoner?" In 2 weeks, the protagonist fought all the senior prisoners in the North Block and won an absolute victory. The convicts watching the fights joyfully shouted, "Senior Gen, he's the best!" Nagasawa smiled and giving a thumbs up confidently said, "He's the strongest. The strongest in the North Block is their senior." Then he brought the protagonist a uniform and quietly said, "He's done well." Following this, he handed him a change of clothes and added, "Does he want a drink? He'll get it now." The protagonist silently took the clothes and slung them over his shoulder. Nagasawa watched him go and asked with a slight grin, would he like a massage? From now on, he would bring him clothes himself. The protagonist walked forward, the same thought spinning in his head. This isn't enough. Fighting the cell superiors was still too weak. He needed to grow. With this victory, the protagonist's name spread throughout the block. No one called him a loser anymore. But with fame came new shadows. Not everything the victory brought was good. Meanwhile, in the visiting room, Shunsuke tilted his head and asked, "Where is Retsu?" Tetsu, sitting opposite, chuckled and replied, "He knows, doesn't he?" Nagao screwed up. The weaklings he looked down on are now squabbling among themselves. He's probably too embarrassed to show his face. Shunsuke smiled, agreeing, "Right. He must be worried about Gen's rapid growth." Tetsu glanced down at his hand as if checking something, and said calmly, "If Gen really does defeat Nagao, he'll be in great demand." He looked away and added, "Yeah, the atmosphere has gotten really dark. It had to rain on the day of the shipment, of all things." Shunsuke countered. There was no sign of rain. Koichi folded his arms and shrugging, said, "It happens. Fine, they're moving out too." After a while, guards walked around the rainy street with flashlights, picking out narrow corridors from the darkness. Meanwhile, in the storage facilities, prisoners were carrying boxes of goods. Shiro stepped forward and asked, "How much did they have?" Retsu, walking behind, calmly replied, 12% more ice and powder than required. He raised an eyebrow slightly and added, "To produce so much even after all that chaos is impressive. He's a genius at this sort of thing." Retsu nodded briefly. They were continuing as usual now. The warden abruptly ordered him to wait, waved his hand to the side, and the convicts immediately set the boxes down on the floor. Then he pulled out a folded piece of paper and, looking directly at Retsu, said, he shouldn't relax just because he thinks they can't hear him. This time they'll change their method. He pointed at the package and continued, he was to collect this surplus. It would be shipped later. Retsu frowned. This was Tetsu's job, wasn't it? What exactly did he mean? The warden paused, then spoke more quietly but firmly. Retsu, the higher-ups still don't know about the death of that crazy former leader. The director hushed everything up. He leaned a little closer and added, was he going to repay the kindness with betrayal? If he did his part, he would be rewarded accordingly. Extending his hand, he finished calmly. Whatever Nagao did, it wouldn't affect him in the least. Even when he got out of here, the Kuriyama Association wouldn't abandon him. After a while, Nagao left the room, rubbed the back of his head, and muttered under his breath, "Damn, my hands are itching to make something louder." He was released from the punishment cell. Dean approached him and, smiling without unnecessary impudence, asked, "Does he need any help?" Nagao paused for a second, as if he didn't immediately understand the question, and then asked, "Huh?" Then a wry smile touched his lips, and, lowering his voice slightly, he added, "Let me think. How about the heads of Eiji and Shiro?" Dean laughed slightly, but there was a hint of nervousness in it, and he playfully cried out, "Please, have mercy." At that moment, Retsu approached them and calmly said, "That's it." He left. Nagao immediately straightened up and, bowing his head slightly, apologized for the inconvenience. Retsu nodded reservedly. He would have to be more careful in the future. He replied curtly, "Of course." He frowned and quietly asked, "But what should they do with Jen? He's completely lost his cool." Retsu frowned, stepped forward, and said firmly, "He'll give him a chance. And there's one more thing only he can do." Meanwhile, the protagonist sneezed loudly. Kanda turned sharply to him and shouted. The last thing she needed was to catch a cold at such an important moment. The protagonist smiled, looking at her, and calmly said, "It's probably Nagao remembering him." Kojo, standing nearby, chuckled. "Most likely, he's already been released. Knowing Retsu, he won't let this slide after being disgraced." A clash was inevitable. Kanda immediately shoved a thermometer into the protagonist's mouth, turned her gaze to Kojo, and asked, "Does he have a plan?" Kojo crossed his arms, thought for a moment, and replied, "Retsu aside, AG is very cunning. He could be planning something truly dangerous, which means they need to strike first." The protagonist yelped sharply as Kanda inserted the thermometer a little deeper. She, ignoring his reaction, added, "By the way, there's something that worries her. The former leader of the Gen Chamber died of his own free will, but the management quickly shut down the investigation." Kojo narrowed his eyes. "Did they shield Retsu?" Kanda nodded briefly and firmly confirmed, "Exactly." She lowered her gaze to the thermometer scale, frowned, and continued, "But Nagao will most likely be disposed of. He killed them in such a short time. Does he think Retsu would protect such a scumbag, even if it becomes his weakness?" The protagonist clenched his fists and firmly declared, if they were protected, he would finish them both off. Nagao must answer for what he's done. Kojo smiled, glancing at his face, and noticed he had a good attitude. Kanda folded her arms across her chest, sighed loudly, and said sternly, "Zeal is commendable, but he mustn't ruin his body. He must be in perfect shape. At this level, even the slightest mistake could be fatal." Kojo silently took off his outerwear and resolutely said, "There's no time to waste. He must train to the point of exhaustion. He must show him all his determination." The protagonist immediately took a stance and abruptly shouted, "Attack!" Meanwhile, a prisoner burst into the room breathing heavily and shouted, "This is bad." He held out a letter and added, "This." IG slowly took the letter, glanced at it, and asked, "What, a challenge to a fight?" Then he unfolded the letter, read a few lines, and, handing it to Nagao, said coldly, "They are of no value." Nagao snatched the letter, ran his eyes over it, and his face instantly turned purple, veins bulging in his temples. Through clenched teeth he muttered, "This idiot even decided to issue a challenge." After a while in the dining hall, one of the prisoners glanced sideways at his comrade and said, "Jen issued a challenge." He shrugged indifferently. Everyone is already talking about it. The first one didn't let up and asked, "Who does he think will win?" Another guy slammed his palm on the table and shouted, "It's obvious, isn't it? No one can overcome the boss's monstrous strength." The first prisoner nodded, but a note of doubt crept into his voice. "Of course, Jen has been strong lately, but, frankly, they are on completely different levels." At that moment, Ponytail raised his hand and shouted loudly, "Attention! Time to place your bets." Someone from the corner snorted, "There's no point in betting. The result is already clear. Anyone who bets on Jen is a complete idiot." Before he could finish speaking, a tray flew at his head. He clutched the bruised area and howled, "What's going on here, huh?" Fujino was standing nearby. He stepped forward and barked, "Shut up! He just insulted their cell leader, didn't he?" The guy pointed a finger at the crowd and yelled, "Ask the others. Nobody here believes Jen will win. And he still picks a fight." Fujino frowned in irritation and snapped, "Some people here do." Ponytail stared at him in surprise. "Oh." Fujino slammed the bag onto the table with a dull thud and said firmly, "He'll bet everything he has on their cell leader." Night. In a rare moment of calm, a prisoner ran down the corridor, shouting as he ran, "Hurry, or he'll miss this." At that moment, AG entered the room and calmly announced, "Nagao has already moved out." Retsu sat opposite, leisurely lighting a cigarette. He blew out a thin stream of smoke and asked, "Is everything ready?" IG nodded. "Yes, everything is in place." In the dark, Nagao's vision is even worse than usual. If something unexpected happens, he will panic. Retsu squinted. Does he think he can pit them against each other? AG smiled slightly. Yes, Jen is not so flawless, but this will be enough to bring down Nagao. After a while, the prisoners began to gather at the scene of the fight. They squeezed through the narrow passage, snapping at each other. "Don't push! Why did he even come earlier?" Ponytail did not calm down and shouted, "Anyone else want to bet? The bet is 1 to 25. Off to the side." One of the guards leaned towards a colleague and quietly asked, "Is he really going to turn a blind eye to this?" He leisurely lit his cigarette and, keeping his eyes on the crowd, replied, "Listen carefully, newbie. If they don't let them blow off steam, they'll be dealing with much bigger problems later." He slammed his baton on the cabinet and, looking up at the prisoners, he barked, "Don't they understand? You can't interfere, no matter what, unless you want to end up alone." After a while, the opponents stood facing each other. Nagao gritted his teeth and muttered, "So he had the courage to challenge him? He'll send him straight to hell." The protagonist didn't flinch and firmly replied, "He must listen. He didn't choose this place for food or fun. He's here to avenge Masaki, and he'll show everyone how pathetic he is." With these words, he sharply pointed a finger at his opponent. Nagao roared, "Idiot! So he's ready to die, huh?" He lunged forward and threw his fist forward, but the protagonist had already slid to the side and immediately responded with a punch to the stomach. Nagao only chuckled. Pathetic. His punch was like a mosquito bite. The protagonist dodged the next attack and briefly noted to himself his body was too strong. The next moment, Nagao grabbed his arm, squeezed until it crunched, and threw him back with force. A few drops of blood burst from the protagonist's mouth, and he thought, damn, he's much stronger than he thought. Nagao chuckled and said, hey, idiot, is that all he can do? With that kind of strength, he seriously thought he could challenge him? He swung again, but at the last moment, the protagonist rolled and slammed his shoulder into the wall, avoiding a direct blow. He blocked the next lunge with his forearm, and then Nagao swung his leg sharply and kicked him from below, right at the chin. One of the spectators muttered quietly, this is very bad. At that moment, the crowd stirred, and the voices began to overlap. Why is the boss from another block here? He doesn't know. If Jen wins, the northern block will have a new boss. The balance of power could shift. That's why they come to watch such fights. But apparently, he doesn't have the slightest chance of winning. Meanwhile, Nagao grabbed the protagonist by the shirt, yanked him off the floor and asked with a crooked grin, does he think he can get revenge with such strength? What was his name again? Masaki, right? The protagonist gritted his teeth in rage and shouted, damn it, he shouldn't say Masaki's name with his filthy mouth. The next second he lunged forward and headbutted his opponent, forehead to forehead. Someone in the crowd gasped, no way, Jen still has strength left? Another roared, that's it, he's had enough. Suddenly, the lights went out and a thick, palpable darkness fell over the hall. Nagao barked into the darkness. Who the hell turned off the lights? One of the guards clicked his radio and snapped, what's going on? The power's out in the block. His colleague immediately barked, everyone stay put. A calm but stern voice came over the radio. Repairmen are on their way. They'll send security there for now. Whispers crept through the hall. The lights were out. And what will happen to the duel? Maybe Jen will escape. It's impossible to continue in such pitch darkness. You can't see a damn thing. But at that moment, the protagonist quietly stretched his shoulder, as if checking if everything is intact, and his eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. Not long before, the blindfolded protagonist turned to Kojo and asked, why the blindfold? Kojo stood opposite him, arms folded, and calmly replied, the eyes are a person's weak spot. In combat, they're the easiest to target. In case he ever loses his sight, he needs to prepare for it in advance. By wearing the eye patch, he can train his other senses. His reactions will certainly be faster, but the ability to maintain composure in a critical situation is a huge advantage. He shouldn't rely on sight. What the eyes see isn't always useful. The next second, Kojo sharply punched the protagonist in the face and firmly declared he must feel with his ears and skin. When he relies only on sight, his body is the only thing he can rely on. He had to imagine it. Listen to the sounds, feel the air currents, and assess the situation around him. Then Kojo swung his fist again, but the protagonist managed to grab his hand. Kojo only chuckled. The protagonist quietly said, Kojo, I think he's starting to get it. He thought, that's right. When he can't see, the only thing he can rely on are his other senses. In the present, Nagao's furious cry echoed through the room. Who the hell did this? Jen, stop hiding. Come out now. The protagonist instantly assessed the situation and thought, Nagao is 3 meters in front, diagonally to the left. Those present were talking in the darkness. Still no light. He can't see a damn thing. The protagonist glanced into the void and noted, no one else was moving. The guard barked, drowning out the whispers. Attention. If anyone moves without orders, there will be no mercy. They mustn't wait. The protagonist chuckled faintly and thought, the guards aren't going to interfere either. This is simply perfect. The power outage was a surprise, but it was a golden opportunity. Nagao's weakness was endurance. He had to wear him down first. The next second, he gave a sharp kick to the wooden bucket. The metal clanged dully in the darkness. Nagao immediately swung his fist and roared. He's got him. He can't escape. He struck with fury where the sound had just been and mercilessly smashed the bucket to splinters. And then he froze, letting out a stunned breath. What? The protagonist was already behind him. He struck him briefly and harshly with his elbow to the back of the head. Nagao clutched the bruised spot and howled. Oh, he's a dirty idiot. He has to get out quickly. He'll finish him off. He darted his gaze from side to side, though it was of no use in the darkness. The protagonist calmly noted, his breathing is ragged. As soon as he starts moving more actively, he immediately starts to get short of breath, and this, naturally, affects his fighting style. The protagonist abruptly slammed his hand against the wall. At the same moment, Nagao lunged forward and slammed his fist in front of him, then frowned and muttered, damn it. Then the protagonist picked up a mop and banged it against the wall, and soon after, turned on the shower. The water hissed and hit the floor, creating new sounds. Nagao darted around, focusing on the noises, and shouted, he's a bastard. Is he looking down on him? He'll never forgive this. Hey, he has to fight fair. Someone in the crowd asked in bewilderment. What's going on? The convict muttered. Looks like the boss has been taken down. The prisoner next to him snorted. Idiot. How did he think Jen could win in this darkness? Another guy muttered quietly. I wonder if it's possible to change the bet any further? And at that moment, the protagonist silently lunged forward, clearly realizing he was out of breath. This was his chance. He abruptly punched Nagao in the stomach. A few drops of blood escaped the opponent's mouth, and his body jerked from the blow. Without giving him time to recover, the protagonist immediately tripped Nagao and knocked him to the floor. Nagao began to rise, clutching the back of his head, and thought in panic he would definitely try to attack from below again. If he exposed himself, he would seize the opportunity. At that very second, he shouted into the darkness. Hey, he knows he's here. The protagonist quickly approached, mentally counting his steps. Now, if that's what he wants. He found himself behind the opponent. Nagao spun around, feeling the air move, and thought, there it is. He threw his fist forward, but the protagonist ducked sharply, dodging the blow. Then he swung, briefly remembering Kojo's words. Where did he think the most effective place to strike was? An image flashed in his mind, Kojo pointing to his chest and saying, here. He should aim for the third rib. If he did that, he could break 3 bones at once. The protagonist mimicked the blow exactly. Nagao choked on air, coughed, spitting out blood, and fell to his knees. And at that moment, a bright light burst into the room. One of the prisoners gasped in shock. Oh, the lights have come back on. Fujino raised his hand and yelled, pointing to the floor. Hey, look there, the boss has lost. All eyes darted to one spot. Nagao was indeed lying face down on the ground, breathing heavily, unable to rise. At that moment, the protagonist was heavily inhaling, trying to catch his breath. One of the prisoners, not believing his eyes, asked hoarsely, is he imagining this? The boss lost? Another prisoner burst into a shout. Gen 1? The others just looked at each other, as if unable to comprehend what was happening. This simply couldn't be. Nagasawa, not hiding his delight, began counting on his fingers and exhaled. Damn, this is a jackpot. Fujino stood behind him, arms folded across his chest, and said with a slight grin, and he was still against it when he bet on the cell leader. Now he should thank him. At that very second, the warden barked, cutting through the din. The outcome of the duel is clear. Everyone go to your cells immediately. Hurry. Nagasawa didn't even turn around. He just waved his hand and firmly said, no. First, they must thank the cell leader. The guard called out sharply to the protagonist. He had to go too, but without taking his eyes off Nagao, he answered curtly, no, not yet. At that moment, Nagao began to rise, leaning on a trembling hand. Gritting his teeth, he howled. He wouldn't let this go. He'd tear him to pieces. The prisoners shook their heads, unable to hide their amazement. They'd done this to him, and he was still standing, a real monster. Nagao raised his head and yelled, Kinoshita, Natsume, why are they just standing there? They rushed forward, shouting as they ran, they're already here. Kojo placed a heavy hand on the convict's shoulder. He turned sharply and barked, what's wrong with him? Noticing Kojo's calm face, he froze for a moment, then let out an irritated sigh. Kojo tilted his head slightly and calmly asked, where is he going? The people around them were already whispering, their voices merging into a single hum. It was Kojo and Boss Koichi. He'd come to save the cell leader? Okay, Kojo, but why is the Eastern Bloc boss here? Fujino chuckled. Was this cell leader really that tough? Sam nervously shrugged. Maybe they'd bet on Gen now? Ponytail glared at him and barked. Don't be stupid. Nagao gritted his teeth, narrowed his eyes, and quietly muttered. I see. No wonder he'd become so bold. Fine. Then, he'd kill him right before their eyes. He swung his fist again and struck in front of him. The protagonist dodged slightly, noting to himself he had no strength left. He needed to finish this with one blow. The next moment, he saw Nagao, losing his balance, flying straight at him. The protagonist slid sharply to the side, and Nagao slammed his fist with all his might into a pipe running along the wall. The metal crunched, and a section of the pipe broke off and clattered to the floor. Nagao grabbed the broken piece, his eyes blazing with madness, and roared, oh, he's an idiot. This is his end. He must die. With these words, he swung the heavy pipe. The protagonist remained in his stance, calmly assessing the distance. He saw the metal approaching and thought, one blow and he's finished. Since he had the range advantage, retreating was useless, so instead, he would close in and strike. As the pipe rushed forward again, he abruptly dodged the blow, stepped inside the range, and with a powerful movement struck the opponent's arm, knocking the weapon away. Then he spun and stepped back slightly. Nagao grinned crookedly, grabbed the pipe again, and roared. He thinks this is enough for victory? One of the onlookers muttered quietly. He's trying to overwhelm him with brute force, but to move like that with such wounds, Nagao is a monster. The situation is lousy. Kojo just shook his head. Not a sure thing. The next second, the protagonist dodged the blow again and lashed out with a sharp blow to the opponent's arm. Nagao flew back, breathing heavily, convulsively clutching the pipe and screaming, he's had enough of him. When will he die? He struck in front of himself again, putting the last of his rage into the movement. The protagonist froze for a moment, then swung sharply and thought, it's time. He struck from below upwards, his fist right at the chin. Nagao jerked, flew back, losing his balance. The protagonist didn't give him time to recover. A series of hard blows rained down right on the face. He stepped closer and muttered through clenched teeth, repent, before everyone he hurt, and then go to hell. With these words, he added the finishing blow, a kick to the face. Nagao froze for a second, then his eyes rolled back and lay unconscious. The crowd froze, not daring to move, and then the protagonist, exhausted, fell to his knees and then completely sank to the floor. Kojo called out to him worriedly, hey! He immediately stepped forward, grabbed the protagonist, and threw his arm over his shoulder. The protagonist quietly exhaled, Kojo. He smiled slightly and asked, did he see? He did it. Kojo smiled weakly in response, that was magnificent. In the battle between Nagao and Gen 1, 24 hours ago, Retsu flicked the ash from his cigarette and calmly said, it's time for Nagao to disappear. Eiji, standing behind him, tilted his head slightly. What will the higher-ups say? Retsu shrugged. Everyone is worried about the way he's been acting lately. He thinks winning fights will make him superior to everyone else. We need to get rid of him before he starts acting up. He paused for a second, then added, almost to himself, he'd long wanted to see him and Gen devour each other. He could handle it, right? AG placed his hand on his chest and answered firmly, of course. If the outcome of the fight seemed uncertain, they would turn off the lights. That would make the duel much more interesting. Retsu frowned, just to make sure he didn't notice. If he couldn't even defeat Gen, then he was completely useless. In the present, Retsu silently poured a bucket of water right in Nagao's face. His eyes widened and he howled. Damn it, what the hell was he doing? Noticing Retsu in front of him, he froze for a moment, disbelieving. Boss? No, next time he definitely would. Before he could finish, Shiro coldly snapped. There would be no next time. That was the rule. He had to surrender. Shiro turned and walked away. Nagao, leaning on his elbow, tried to rise again and shouted, no way, he can still fight. At that moment, Shiro, passing by Retsu, quietly said, he knows too much. He must make sure he is eliminated. Nagao, as if he had not heard anything around him, hoarsely shouted, boss, he always worked hard for him. He calmly replied, yes, he appreciates it. Bye. Then the supervisor waved his hand to his colleague. Follow him. They have work. His colleague wanted to object, but the supervisor barked sharply. Leave it to them. Everyone, follow him. Hurry, let's go. Then IG approached the fallen man and Nagao asked, that light glitch, he staged it, right? In response, he smirked. No, just a coincidence. Although he had planned to pull that off too. He was destined to lose. He had always wanted to finish him off so badly that it made him sick. After that, he looked at the group of prisoners behind him and said, now is their chance to get even. They started murmuring. Seriously? What if he fights back? Idiot. They had permission to do that. The next second, one of the prisoners walked up to Nagao and looking him straight in the eyes, suddenly kicked him in the face with all his might. He straightened up, looked at IG, and he said, if they all attack together, there's nothing to fear. The others immediately picked up. Okay, let's go. Time to settle the score for all these years. After everything he did, they will never forgive him. Nagao breathed out barely audibly. Stop. But the next second, a barrage of blows fell on him. Fists, feet, anything that came to hand. Someone screamed. They will kill him. He never thought this day would come. One of the guys stepped on Nagao's hand, pinning it to the floor, and barked. Don't act tough, you jerk. He punched him, and the next guy, choking with rage, started kicking him and shouting, because of him, his brother died. He has to give him back, you idiot. Eiji watched this calmly for a few seconds, then waved his hand at his subordinate and said curtly, let them leave first, and they must report to the boss. The disposal is complete. Eiji headed toward the exit and with a barely perceptible nod to the void, thought, goodbye, General. Sometime later, Shiro walked down a narrow corridor next to the director. Shiro noticed, Retsu's progress lately had been simply brilliant. So what about Nagao? The director smiled slightly. Of course, he will keep his promise. Now is a crucial time because of the upcoming council elections, so he must make sure that no problems arise. Shiro chuckled softly. And yet, he didn't have to come here. He could explain everything himself. The director paused for a second, turned to him, and said calmly, Shiro, the main thing is sincerity. If he's present in person, it will be easier for everyone to understand. He strode forward again and added, if in 3 months he becomes a member of the city council, this colony will be at his disposal. The colony is both his personal achievement and his source of funding. He trusts him more than anyone. He should oversee everything here for him. It's in his interests too. He understands what I'm talking about, right? Shiro nodded briefly. Of course. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, Tetsu slung his arm over the back of his chair and lazily drawled. Oh, Retsu. He always loved to be on the sidelines, and now he's breaking them himself. Retsu shrugged sharply, his voice turning barbed. Mind your own business, stranger. He wants him to rip out his tongue? Tetsu beckoned him with a finger, a hint of mockery in his eyes. Would he dare try then? They would see if he had the guts. If the boss lost after the general, then Gen would truly become king of the northern bloc. It must be damn nice to walk over bodies like that. Retsu jumped up, his face dark with rage. Don't push it. He had listened to his nonsense for too long. He slapped Tetsu hard across the face, sharp and precise. He was dreaming. Did he really think he could take him out? It was too early for him to compete with him. Tetsu froze for a moment, then frowned and barked. Hey, Retsu, if he wants to let off some steam, let him go and fight Gen. There's no point in taking it out on him. With these words, he raised his fist and rushed into the attack. At that very second, a sharp voice rang out from the depths of the room. The two of them. Enough. Everyone turned around. The door to the room swung open and the director stepped forward. His gaze was cold, almost icy. The director said with a venomous grin, he is glad to see them so cheerful, but how dare they cause trouble in his colony? He tilted his head slightly, as if assessing them, and quietly added, it looks like they don't value their lives, huh? After a while, Shunsuke was holding a glass in his hands and, smiling, handed it to the director. Shunsuke said, here, take it. He's not usually like this. It's just that a lot of work has piled up lately, and Mr. Retsu is a little out of sorts. The director replied, he's apologizing. He didn't mean to scare them. He's just really worried. They will forgive him, right? Shunsuke smiled. Of course. Tetsu also smiled affably. He shouldn't bother so much for them. Retsu laughed awkwardly. The director added, they're all nice guys. It looks like he had nothing to worry about. He needed to discuss something important with them today. The judicial department was coming to inspect them. He wanted to tell them they were all being very diligent and obedient. They could handle it, right? Shiro barked. Is that clear? If they cause trouble, they'll go to jail instead of chilling out. But once they go to jail, they won't be able to live their lives like before, okay? So it's in their best interests too. They shouldn't make things difficult for him or themselves, Tetsu said. Everything is calm in the South Block. But what about Mr. Retsu's block? They're missing a leader. Won't he lose control of everyone? Retsu shouted irritably. It's none of his business. The supervisor cleared his throat, trying to stay within the rules. According to the rules, Jen should be the new boss. Retsu began indignantly. Him. Before he could finish, Shiro cut him off aggressively. He had no right to refuse. That was an order. He shouldn't let his personal feelings get involved. Here, rules come first. The director smiled softly. He should be a little more lenient, Shiro. By the way, wasn't he the one who sent Jen to the North Block to avenge his brother? Who would have thought he would become so strong? And that's not all. They don't know what the head of the judicial department is like yet, so he better not cause any trouble. For now, he should keep his temper under control. Once they sort this out, he can do with him as he pleases. Tetsu nodded. Mr. Retsu doesn't mind. The director said, then it's decided. Now about production. From now on, he must be more careful. Meanwhile, several convicts crowded near the ward, talking among themselves. Hey, what's going on there? He should get out of here. He can't see. It's his own fault he's late. The next second, Kanda abruptly threw open the doors and barked. Quiet, they're disturbing the patient's rest. Fujino approached her and, smiling affably, asked, is everything all right with the cell leader? Kanda put her hand on her hip and replied, it will be if they all stop making noise. Fujino turned to the crowd and barked, quiet everyone. If they make any noise, he'll knock anyone out on the spot. Kanda looked away, and then Aiji stepped out of the shadows. Those present began to whisper. Maybe it was because the cell leader had defeated the boss and tarnished the reputation of the higher-ups? One of the prisoners snorted. What boss? Now he's just Nagao. Aiji walked forward and said firmly, he needs to see Jen. This is the director's order. Kanda stood in his way, folding her arms across her chest, and calmly said, he's still asleep. Should I tell him everything later? If you want to tell him in person, you'll have to wait here. Eiji frowned slightly and replied, it will be announced soon anyway. Jen will replace Nagao. He will become the new boss of the North Block. The crowd froze, exchanging puzzled glances. A moment later, one of the prisoners shouted, this kid's the boss now. Fujino grinned broadly and shouted loudly, hey, show some respect to Boss Jen. Long live the big man. Kanda returned to the room and, looking at the protagonist, quietly asked, did he hear? Kojo stood nearby, his head bowed slightly, and said he'd expected something like this. So what was he going to do now? The protagonist sat up in bed and shrugged. He didn't know yet, but he didn't think he could just let it go. Kojo pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, looking straight at him. The director's orders were not to be questioned. An inspection from the judicial department would be coming soon. No mistakes could be tolerated. The protagonist frowned in surprise. The judicial department? Who were they? Kojo calmly explained. They inspect the facility's security and the prisoner rehabilitation process. And most importantly, they ensure discipline is maintained. A boss is needed to keep everyone in line and prevent unrest. For the director, who was running for the city council for the third time this year, the colony's success was of colossal importance. Any problems could affect the outcome of the elections. Usually it doesn't matter if one of the boss's positions is empty, but right now, someone who can keep everything under control is absolutely essential. The protagonist narrowed his eyes. How did he know about all this? How did he know all this? Kojo was silent for a moment, not looking away. At that moment, Kanda stepped forward and quietly said she would leave the rest to him, Kojo. He must definitely apologize to Jen properly. He asked in surprise, what did this all mean? Kojo placed his hand on the edge of the bed and said calmly, he apologizes for everything that happened before. He took you as an apprentice only to use you. He counted on confronting Retsu. He would expose the rottenness of this colony. He apologizes for hiding this from him. He slightly lifted his bangs, revealing his face, and added, he will introduce himself again. He is the leader of the Hongsun group and an officer in the Illegal Substances Suppression Department. The protagonist froze, his eyes wide in shock. Kojo paused for a moment, then added, looking off to the side, as if reliving the past. He lost his parents early in life and was left alone with his little sister. One day, when he got into a street fight, a man from Kurayama saved him. He was only 10 years old at the time. He begged him to teach him how to fight. He didn't just teach him, he fed him and gave him a roof over his head. That man, his benefactor, was actually second in the Kurayama hierarchy. The protagonist quietly asked, what happened to him now? Kojo said curtly, he's dead. As soon as he left the organization, they finished him off. The protagonist asked, why was he killed? He answered, he didn't like the way Kurayama ran things. They dealt in human trafficking and illegal substances. That's why he was here. MC clarified, he meant the colony? He answered, that's right. Kurayama was trying to get one of their people hooked on illegal substances in order to eliminate him through him. In the end, that guy ended his life. Shino Hokuto, that bastard, killed both his savior and his friend. He will never forgive him. He paused, clenched his fists as if feeling that helplessness again, and continued. After that, I gathered people around me and founded a gang, and then I infiltrated here as a state control agent. With the approval of the authorities, he is collecting evidence here in a case of illegal substance trafficking, so that in one blow, he can shut down both the colony and the organization. Kojo threw back his head, covered his face with his hand, as if hiding the shadow of old memories, and quietly added, he didn't want to drag him into this, but seeing his old self in him, he couldn't ignore him. He wanted to be a support for someone, just as he was for him. If he gets stronger and makes a stir in the colony, they will have a real chance of getting evidence. He lowered his hand and looked straight at the protagonist. Forgive me, he doesn't have to become a general. Koichi will protect him. The protagonist exhaled slowly, his face contorted with a mixture of pain and bitterness. This is terrible. He trusted him all this time. Why had he kept silent? It was unfair. He gripped the edge of the blanket tightly, then suddenly relaxed his fingers and said firmly, "But of course, he will help him." Kojo bowed his head slightly. His voice became quieter. He's not angry with him. The protagonist smiled bitterly. He was very angry, but he could have simply walked past. But he didn't. If he had been left alone, he would have ended up the same as Masaki. Kojo nodded, accepting this bitter truth, and after a short pause asked, could he ask something? About the cause of Masaki's death. According to the autopsy results, Dr. Kanda found a huge dose of illegal substances in his blood. Most likely he, like his benefactor, was simply silenced. But Nagao had nothing to do with it. The one behind the production of illegal substances is Hokuto. Meanwhile, on a bench by the wall, Fujino stared absently into space and muttered, "I wonder when the general will return." Nagasawa glanced at him and asked with a sly grin, "Is he aiming for the position of cell leader?" Fujino snorted, "Don't be stupid. The general doesn't smoke, right? So they get all the leftovers." At that moment, another prisoner approached them and barked, "Hey, who let him sprawl out here? Get out!" Fujino suddenly jerked his head up, frowned and barked back. "What the hell does he want? General Gen himself is behind him. Got it?" The prisoner froze for a moment, then burst out laughing and, pointing a finger at Fujino, shouted, "That idiot the boss couldn't stand is now the general? Come on." At that very moment, Retsu stepped forward, gave the guy a short, hard blow to the back of the head, and coldly asked, "What did he just yelp?" He froze, his eyes wide with horror. "Boss?" Retsu walked forward, and a whisper swept through the crowd, immediately turning into shouts. "Hey, Gen is here too, so the rumors weren't lying?" No way. 3 days ago, the protagonist had quietly but firmly said he would become a general, and he had to let him repay the debt. Kojo shook his head. He didn't want to drag him into this anymore. He should focus on how to get out of here and get back to his mother. The protagonist stubbornly pressed his lips together. There was no hiding from Retsu anyway. If that was the case, he simply needed to become stronger, strong enough to start to fear him. That was the only way. Kojo smiled slightly. Something akin to pride flickered in his eyes. He had matured. After a while, Retsu stopped in front of the protagonist, folded his arms across his chest, and asked coldly, "So what is he planning to do?" He knows he could kill him at any second. The protagonist didn't look away. He was prepared for it, but he wouldn't act so recklessly now. Retsu raised an eyebrow slightly. "You've become sharp-tongued. It's hard to believe he's the same boy everyone kicked around." The protagonist calmly replied, "You can't survive here with tears alone, especially under a boss like him. Their conflict won't be resolved so easily, but right now he needs him, and he needs position. How about a temporary truce?" With these words, he left the room. Retsu lit a cigarette, exhaled smoke, and tossed it without looking at Eiji. "What does he think?" Eiji thoughtfully rubbed his chin. "He will be useful, but there are some concerns." Retsu glanced at him. "Oh?" He explained. "Gen has clawed his way back from the very bottom, so people will be more willing to follow him. However, it is unlikely that he will blindly follow orders, and Kojo is on his side. They should keep an eye on him." Retsu chuckled. "Kojo, he has refused the director himself more than once. It is difficult to understand what is on his mind. Gen could be his pawn. Let him take over Nagao's duties, but keep an eye on him. He must not get wind of the illegal substances." Eiji nodded. He understood. He smiled slightly and quietly added, "Gen is just a puppet." In the present, Retsu stood in front of the crowd of prisoners, his voice drowning out all conversation. "Nagao has been defeated, and that means, from today, Gen is the new general of the Northern Bloc." He turned to the protagonist and with a slight mocking intonation asked, would he like to say a few words? The protagonist stepped forward. There was a murmur of voices. Then someone shouted, "Hey, this will end badly. Who would have thought that he would actually become a general?" The protagonist said loudly and clearly, "They don't need to be afraid. He will leave the past in the past. He is not Nagao. As long as he is here, he will not tolerate any bullying. As long as they abide by the rules of the colony and the Northern Bloc, he promises to protect them all." There was a moment of silence, and then the courtyard exploded with shouts. "General Gen! Hooray! He is the best. They will follow him to the end. Long live the new general." A little later, Hiromi knocked back his glass of alcohol with a crash and howled, "What do you mean? General Gen? How did that brat manage to become a general? He has to listen to him, brother." Retsu sat opposite him, calm and still as a rock. "This is not a school. They had enough problems already. No need to irritate him." Hiromi slammed his fist on the table, the veins in his neck bulging. "He promised he'd make Gen's life a living hell. He didn't care about him. He only thought about himself. Mom did everything she could to get Gen here. So what the hell was he doing slacking off now?" Retsu leaned forward sharply, his voice turning steely. Did he really think he was joking? If he interfered, they'd both be done for. No matter how much he yelled, he couldn't get over his head. For now, he had to endure it. He wouldn't abandon his little brother. But if he started whining again, even his mother might turn her back on him. He stood up and headed for the exit. Hiromi gritted his teeth, watching him go, and muttered, "Fine. He'd do it himself." His face twisted with rage, his eyes darkened, and he said, "Gen, since he can't get to him, he'll take it out on those he cares about." After a while, the warden stepped forward in the visiting room, his voice thundering, drowning out any whispers. "Listen to his command. Anyone who thinks of yelling yelling or using their hands will rot in solitary confinement. Did they understand? The convicts replied, yes, sir. The protagonist could barely contain his trembling inside as the thought flashed through his mind. Finally, he'll see his mother. It turned out the elite were even allowed to visit without waiting in line. The warden buried his face in the paperwork and barked, Ichihara, Nakatsu, Yamamura, to the visiting room, and Jen. The protagonist shouted, yes. The warden glanced over the lines, then suddenly frowned and muttered, he's going somewhere else. He was surprised. Huh? The warden waved his hand toward the corridor. Follow him quickly. They walked to a separate, quieter room. The warden swung the door open and said curtly, come in. The protagonist froze for a second, then stepped inside, already smiling. Mother. He abruptly opened the door to the stall and hurriedly said, I'm sorry, he's late. At the same time, at the main gate of the colony, the mother desperately cried out, please, they have to listen to her. The prison worker looked outside and sighed wearily. Her again? She clutched the bag to her chest and said, I'm sorry, she's come such a long way. She needs to see her son. The man glanced at the list. Wait a minute, please. Strange thing, Jen has already let someone in. According to the regulations, only one visitor per shift. So come another time. She screamed. No, she hasn't seen him in ages. If she misses this chance, who knows when the next one will come. He softened a little, but firmly repeated, he understands everything, but order is order. She clings to one last chance. Then at least tell me who came to see him. The worker checked the notes again. He'll take a look now. There it is, his best friend. At that moment, the protagonist froze in surprise, barely managing to pick up the phone. In front of him, on the other side of the glass, sat Hiromi, a sly grin playing across his face. Hiromi tapped the glass and said, long time no see, his little toy, Jen. Fragments of the past flashed in his mind. Ever since childhood, Hiromi had believed he was special. His father was a government official, his mother the head of a conglomerate. His older brother was unbeatable in a fight, getting away with everything. Wherever he went, nothing changed. No one wanted to make an enemy of the Kanemoto family. Even in the future, he could do whatever he wanted. No one would say a word against him. He felt like a god. But then, because of one fearless idiot, everything collapsed. That scene flashed before his eyes again. His mother, breaking into a scream, she will pay whatever he says. Do something. And the doctor, looking at the floor, quietly replied, he was sorry, but it was impossible to restore the tissue. Plastic surgery would help partially, but his face would still look unnatural. It would never be the same again. After that, he became a laughingstock, an outcast, whom everyone stared at like a monster. Who in this world needs a guy without a nose? His entire great future had washed away, as if it had never existed. He thought, it's all over. And now Hiromi calmly stuck his chopsticks into a plate of teokbokki and held it out. He knows, his mother's is simply incredibly delicious. The protagonist exploded. Idiot, what did he do to her? Hiromi just lazily shrugged. Oh, don't worry, he's been exhausted here, without her, right? He even took care of him. He recorded a video for him. Look closely at your precious mommy. He turned the phone screen to the glass. In the recording, several thugs were methodically beating his mother. She covered herself with her hands, but the blows came one after another. Hiromi chuckled contentedly. The quality is brilliant, right? He'd splurged on a fancy camera on purpose. He knew she was tough, unlike him. She'd endured it all without even a peep. True, torturing her was a bit boring. Skin and bones. So, do you like it? The protagonist screamed, his voice breaking with pain and rage. Mom, he'll never forgive him, Hiromi. He threw the phone down and at the same second slammed his fist against the glass with all his might. A network of cracks ran across the transparent surface. He growled. He swears he'll finish him off. The protagonist punched the glass again and shouted, his voice breaking with rage. If he wants to take it out on someone, go ahead, he's here. But he can't touch his mother. The next second, the guards burst into the room, shouting at the same time, Jen, calm down. Enough. The protagonist screamed. Coward, come out and fight like a man. The prison staff tried to restrain him, but the wave of anger was too strong. The protagonist suddenly threw his fist forward and hit one of the guards, throwing him aside. The second guard immediately grabbed the radio and shouted, reinforcements urgently in the visiting room. Now, I repeat, urgently needed backup. Jen has completely lost his mind. He's going berserk. Watching this from his seat, Hiromi only grinned, as if watching his favorite performance. What a magnificent spectacle. Come on, show even more fury. Let there be more blood. Several more guards burst into the room and fell upon the protagonist at once. He struggled, screaming, let him go. He'll finish this idiot. Hiromi, don't you dare run away. Hiromi slowly rose from his chair and calmly said, they'll meet again. Don't worry, and he'll keep an eye on his mother. He cast a mocking glance at the protagonist, turned around and headed for the door. The protagonist shouted, shut up, idiot, come back. He lunged forward as far as his arms would go and extended his hand toward the retreating enemy, shouting, stop. But the next second, the door slammed shut with a dull thud. After a while, the guard threw the protagonist into solitary confinement. Sit here in silence and think about your behavior. The door slammed, the lock clanked. The protagonist was left alone. He leaned his forehead against the cold wall and then slammed the door and growled, damn it. He tried to collect his thoughts, how to protect his mother, ask Kojo for help, but he can't rely on him forever. Damn, he thought he had become stronger. Was he still such a weakling if he couldn't even protect those closest to him? At that moment, calm footsteps were heard outside the door. Tetsu stopped at the bars, folded his arms across his chest, and said with a barely noticeable smile, If problems were solved with one blow to the door, no one in this world would suffer. The protagonist flinched, recognizing the voice, and sharply raised his head. Tetsu, what is he doing here? Tetsu tilted his head slightly. He heard Hiromi looking in on him. He didn't think he'd be the one to end up alone after this. So tell me, what happened that was so funny? The protagonist smiled bitterly. News really does travel fast among the leaders. Only he arrived late. Tetsu calmly retorted, not at all. How about teaming up? The protagonist frowned. Teaming up? How could he be of use to him? Tetsu said bluntly, he's afraid Retsu will finish him off. If that happens, he won't see his mother and won't be able to return to a normal life, and he simply can't stand Retsu. Because of him, he can't rise higher. If they take him out, Hiromi will lose an ally and he will officially take his place. This will guarantee his safety. The protagonist said, he's not the type to do things for others. What is his goal? Tetsu, without looking away, continued, he will hand over all of Retsu's affairs to him, and his gang won't interfere in his affairs anymore. Anyway, think about it. His mother's safety is the most important thing to him, right? When you make up your mind, let me know. He turned and left, leaving the protagonist alone with his heavy thoughts. A thought flashed through the protagonist's mind. Retsu's business, then. After a while, the guard opened the cell door and growled, he can go out. Even the higher-ups have to follow the rules. If you pull something like that again, you won't get off with 5 days in the slammer. The protagonist silently stepped into the corridor. The prisoner standing nearby immediately perked up. Oh, he's out. Welcome back. He didn't answer, just nodded briefly, and moved on. Soon he stopped at the door of the medical office and loudly asked, is Dr. Kanda in? A young woman with a neat hairdo looked at him from behind the desk in surprise. Kanasaki Miyabi. She slowly looked up and chuckled slightly. The protagonist froze, not expecting to see a stranger here. Who is she? Where is Dr. Kanda? Miyabi adjusted her hair and smiled softly. The doctor is currently on rounds, and she is Miyabi, a nurse intern. She came closer to the protagonist and looked at him carefully. Is he hurt? He should tell her what he's complaining about. He shook his head. No, he's not hurt. He needs to see Dr. Kanda. He has a routine checkup. Miyabi smiled again, bowing her head slightly. I see. So he's the famous Gen. Dr. Kanda told her to wait for him. The protagonist frowned. Is she waiting for him? How does she even know him? She answered easily. There's not a single person in the colony who doesn't know him. He's the same guy everyone bullied. And then he took out his sworn enemy and took his place. She took another half step forward, her eyes shining with curiosity. She's only been here 3 days, but she's already heard a lot. They say they almost knocked his eye out. Was that scary? And how did he get so strong? It's incredibly cool to defeat a monster like Nagao. The protagonist shuddered uncomfortably. Nagao, she added. He probably has some secret techniques. Will you show me? He looked down and quietly replied. He doesn't have anything like that. At that moment, Miyabi's phone rang briefly. She glanced at the screen, then sighed. Time's up. Okay, then wait for Dr. Kanda. Oh, I almost forgot. She extended her hand and placed a lollipop in the protagonist's palm. From a medical point of view, sweets help calm the nerves. Please, try not to end up in solitary confinement again, okay? Then she waved, already heading for the door. See you later, local star? The protagonist remained standing in the middle of the corridor, looking at the lollipop in his hand. He muttered, Miyabi. Huh, interesting person. After some time, the protagonist was furiously raining punches on the punching bag. Beads of sweat flew in all directions. His knuckles bled, but he did not slow down. Kojo watched him, gritting his teeth, and then suddenly shouted, enough! He's covered in blood. The protagonist froze for a moment, breathing heavily, and then snapped. It's just a scratch. He's perfectly fine. He hit the punching bag again, putting all his pent-up rage into the blow, and hissed. Do you still have training? He needs to get strong enough to crush Retsu, and fast. Kojo stepped closer, his voice harsh. Retsu is the strongest in the colony after Koichi. This is pure self-destruction. He only defeated Nagao by sheer luck. The protagonist gritted his teeth and, without looking at his mentor, barked. As soon as he finished training, everything would be fine. He would crush him. Okay? Even as the leader, he still couldn't protect those dear to him. He would crush every single one of them. The next second, Kojo grabbed his arm and barked, get a grip. The protagonist jerked, pulled his hand away and snapped. What is he doing? Kojo immediately grabbed his wrist, preventing him from moving away. Does he think he can just ignore him? The protagonist stepped closer, clenching his fists, and growled. If he's going to stand in his way, he won't hold back. He raised his fist, but Kojo easily dodged it. The protagonist, losing his balance, spun around and rushed forward again. The next moment, Kojo angrily grabbed him by the shirt and barked, enough! The protagonist shouted, shut up, and lunged forward, trying to headbutt him. But Kojo got there first. He delivered a sharp knee, interrupting the attack. At that moment, Kanda burst into the room and shouted, stop this immediately. Are they planning to destroy everything here? Kojo closed his eyes for a second, as if collecting his thoughts, and calmly said, I'm sorry, he'll stop this right now. Without giving the protagonist a chance to attack again, he struck him briefly and harshly on the neck, just enough to immobilize him. He picked up the limp body and turned to Kanda, examined his arm. She frowned, Why did they have to bring him to this state? Kojo said gloomily. Because of Hiromi, he'd completely lost his mind. He laid the protagonist on the bed and covered him with a blanket. That was the only way to stop him. Kanda came closer, bowing her head. Solitary confinement was always incredibly stressful. He needed to let off some steam. Kojo smiled bitterly. That alone wouldn't solve anything. A more radical solution was needed. After some time, the protagonist slowly came to his senses. Kojo stood before him, looking him straight in the eye. He calmly said, "Finally, he's awake." He'd been out for 3 hours. Apparently, they weren't letting him sleep in solitary confinement. The protagonist propped himself up on his elbows, wincing in pain, and quietly said, "I'm sorry." He even swung at him. Kojo waved his hand. "Forget it." But he had to answer one question. Was he really going to fight Retsu? The protagonist clutched the sheet with his fingers and answered firmly. Hiromi was only being so brazen because of his parents' connections and his brother's strength. He had to eliminate this threat. He wasn't going to sit back and wait for Retsu to kill him. At that moment, Kanda shone a flashlight into his eyes, testing his reaction, and sternly said, "Think carefully. With his current strength, this was sheer recklessness. No one had ever defeated the boss. Be careful." The protagonist said, "But if he doesn't do anything, his mother, he doesn't have time." Kojo bowed his head, his gaze hardening. His men would sort this out. But in exchange, he must learn to control his emotions. Hatred alone wouldn't save those he cared about. Don't get into trouble. He needed to keep his cool. Meanwhile, Mom stood behind the counter of her small shop, mechanically handing over goods to a customer. "Here you go." The girl smiled. "Thank you so much." Before Mom could exhale, Hiromi approached the counter, surrounded by his subordinates. One of them lazily said, "Well, shall we continue what we started?" Hiromi smirked. Parents are responsible for their sons' sins. He stepped closer to Mom, his voice turning icy. "Here they go again. Business is improving?" Mom turned pale, her fingers clutching the edge of the counter. "Please, this shop is her only income." Hiromi slowly removed his mask, revealing a nosepad, and said coldly, "Her son left him this souvenir, so she'll have to answer for this." He nodded to one of his men. "Hey, feed the lady some of that scalding soup. Hurry." The subordinate roughly grabbed the mother and brought a bowl of steaming liquid to her face. "If it cools down, her stomach will hurt. They don't want that, right?" She stared in horror at the boiling liquid, unable to move. The next moment, the subordinate stepped out from around the corner with his men and barked, "Stop this immediately." "What the hell is he doing?" Hiromi turned his head, narrowing his eyes. "What's the problem, man? Is he this old woman's boyfriend? Does he even know who he is?" Without waiting for an answer, the subordinate sharply slapped him across the face and calmly asked, "He's a rude guy, huh? Maybe he should chop off his hand?" Hiromi howled with rage, pointing a finger at the subordinate. "Wait, freak! How dare he? Finish off those bastards!" His men rushed forward, but from the other side, the subordinate's fighters were already advancing. One of them flexed his wrist, grinning predatorily. The boss ordered him to show this brat how cruel the real world is. Get ready. The next second, a brutal fight broke out. One of the bandits pinned his opponent to the floor, putting his foot on his face, and smirked. "What? Still not enough?" The subordinate stepped closer, his gaze icy. It was only a warning. If the lesson wasn't learned, next time he would rip his damn arm off. He walked past the fallen man, throwing over his shoulder, "Don't let him see his mug here again." Mom, trembling all over, stepped toward him and spoke hurriedly. "Thank you." She doesn't know how to thank them. The subordinate softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "If anything happens, please, she must let me know right away." At that moment, Hiromi rose to his feet, clenching his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. He thought, "Damn it, he'll kill every single one of them." His teeth gritted with rage. After a while, he was walking down a busy street and, brushing against a guy's shoulder, shouted, "Hey, watch where you're going." The guy turned around, narrowing his eyes. "Huh? This isn't a sandbox for him." Hiromi took a sharp step toward him, raising his fist. "Don't you dare call him a kid." Meanwhile, the music was blaring in the club. The crowd on the dance floor was merging into a single rhythm, and the waitresses were scurrying between the tables with trays. One of them approached a closed room, knocked carefully, and opening the door a crack, said, "Excuse me." She brought drinks. She placed the tray on the table, but at that very moment, one of the men grabbed her colleague and reached for the girl's chest. She backed away, her voice shaking. "Please don't." The man burst out laughing. "Stop playing the innocent." The girl jerked in panic, knocking over her glass. It flew to the floor and shattered into pieces. The man immediately grabbed her by the hair and barked, "Is she making fun of him?" She screamed in pain. And at that very moment, a heavy hand fell on his shoulder. Hokuto stared at him without blinking. "Hey, don't hit a woman." Without waiting for an answer, he struck the man so hard that he flew back against the wall. Silence fell over the room. All eyes darted to Hokuto. The man staggered and lowered his head, the deputy head. Hokuto slowly approached him, his voice calm, which only made it more frightening. Ruining everyone's fun was unacceptable. He muttered, "He apologizes. It won't happen again." Hokuto said coldly, "What he hates most are those who hit women, and those who hide behind the name of the organization." And he managed to become both. He pulled out a knife, and the next second, a pained scream rang out. When it was over, Hokuto turned to the girl trembling with fear and calmly said, "This is compensation for disrespect." He handed her a tray with a wad of cash and a man's severed hand. "She must remember, Haishan society honors its code." Her colleague, barely holding back tears, whispered, "Thank him so much. She will never forget this." The girls hurried out, and the deputy head said, "This idiot should be sold on the black market. Let him pay for the damage with his body." Hokuto sank onto the sofa, lazily waving his hand. Well, what are you standing there for? We need to have fun. The drinks are on me. The crowd immediately came to life. Joyful shouts rang out. Thank you, Deputy Head. Then we will not be shy. At that moment, a man approached him, leaned over and quietly whispered something in his ear. Hokuto slightly raised an eyebrow. Did Akira lose to someone? The man replied, he rarely loses. Should he check? Hokuto put the glass on the table. No, it sounds interesting, so he will go himself. Meanwhile, Akira lay unconscious on the deserted street. A broken iron chair lying nearby, as if it had been thrown like a toy. Hiromi was breathing heavily, beads of sweat falling onto the asphalt. He stepped on Akira's chest and, gritting his teeth, barked, he sees? He has to say it again. These days youth have completely lost their fear. He took a step back, ran his hand over his face and chuckled. He's not that cool. All he has to do is get angry. At that moment, a leisurely clap of hands rang out from the darkness. Hokuto stepped into the light, crossing his arms over his chest. Impressive. Hiromi spun around, eyeing the stranger warily. What does he want? Hokuto stepped closer. He has strength and a good base, but he acts too roughly. Hiromi barked. Who the hell is he anyway? Hokuto calmly introduced himself. Hokuto. He should go with him. He will make him stronger. With these words, he placed a hand on his shoulder. Hokuto bowed his head slightly and added calmly, he will teach him to fight. For real. Hiromi frowned. His gaze darkened. He didn't know who he was. But what the hell was he planning? One of his subordinates lunged forward, shouting, "Ah, him!" But Hokuto only waved his hand briefly, and he froze, as if he had hit an invisible wall. Hokuto calmly said he would not force him. How about a bet? He would hit with only one hand and still win. Hiromi suddenly burst out laughing. He was so drunk, and now he was daydreaming. Go ahead, attack, old man. He shouldn't blame him if he ended up crying. Hokuto raised an eyebrow cheerfully. He was giving him 3 seconds. He could attack first. Hiromi snapped into a stance, his fists clenched tightly enough to crack. He didn't respect him at all. He would wipe that grin off his face with one punch. He swung, putting all his fury into the blow, but the next second his hand was clamped in an iron grip. Hokuto looked at him almost boredly. 3, 2. Hiromi gritted his teeth, trying to break free, but he couldn't move a finger. He thought, impossible. He can't even move. Hokuto said, 1, and then he struck from below upwards, right on the chin. Hiromi flew back and collapsed to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. He sighed heavily, propped himself up on his elbows and stared at Hokuto. Impossible. His punch was much faster than his brother's. He didn't even have time to react. Hokuto held out his hand. If he wants to continue, that's fine with him. He was in a good mood today. Hiromi wiped the blood from his chin and barked, don't be overconfident. He just let his guard down. He can still fight. The next second, Hokuto grabbed him by the neck and yanked him into the air. He asked, fight? With what? With that mouth that only yapped? Hiromi hung there, gasping for air, thinking in horror, he's a monster. His speed and strength were simply insane. Without letting go, Hokuto removed Hiromi's nosepiece with his free hand and idly twirled it in his fingers. Who would have thought he had such a secret? Maybe they flush it down the drain? Hiromi shouted, stop. Hokuto chuckled, hey. He could make it so he wouldn't have to hide his face anymore. Which would he choose? Hiromi muttered through clenched teeth, him. Before he could finish, Hokuto abruptly let go. Hiromi fell to his knees and coughed, gasping for air. He looked up at Hokuto, his reddened eyes wide. Who the hell was he? He smiled calmly. Just an old man who had taken a shine to a stubborn kid, and the one who could make him truly strong. He stepped closer, his voice quieter, but that only added weight. He hated being subservient to others. He wanted power, but that wasn't enough. He'd never win that way. If he went with him and became a monster, feared by everyone, he could take revenge. He could do whatever he wanted. He had to regain his lost pride another way. He handed Hiromi the overlay. With it, he'd gain a position where no one would dare laugh at him. Meanwhile, in Retsu's office, he asked irritably, a position? Why the hell Jen? Ig stood across from him and replied, it was the director's decision. Retsu took a drag on his cigarette, blew out the smoke and muttered, he might be connected to Kojo. He can't be allowed to catch wind of their work. But if things remain as they are, the guys from the other units might brainwash him. Eiji bowed his head slightly. That meant they'd turn him into his obedient little dog, unable to disobey his master. Retsu nodded, his gaze turning cold. Continue. Eiji added, the easiest way would be to hook him on illegal substances. Then he won't take a single step without an order. He will obey. He smiled. Besides, if they make him an accomplice, he won't inform on them. No one will trust someone like him. After a while, Fujino, who had been huddled against the wall, stared in horror at Eiji, who asked, did he understand him? He answered, General, he can't. Eiji slowly turned to him. Is he refusing? Does he think he's important just because Jen is now also a general? He answered, that's not true. Jen was just kind to him. Ig said, he sees it, he cares about his friends, but he's not asking him to kill him. Just slip it into his drink or into his food. It's not difficult. Isn't that the best way out? Fujino recoiled. Even if Jen doesn't say anything, Kojo won't forgive it. They'll kill him. Eiji stepped closer, his voice turning icy. If you refuse, you'll die right here and now. Did he really think they'd let you go to Jen after he learned their secret? Fujino froze, his face white, his eyes wide with horror. He glanced from the bag to Eiji. Finally, he closed his eyes and quietly, almost in a whisper, said, he'll do it. Eiji immediately broke into a satisfied smile. That's great. He's giving him 3 days. He must behave naturally and without mistakes. Once he's finished, he'll become the new leader of the cell. He'll wait for good news. After that, he turned and headed for the exit.